Freedom came yesterday.
Uh-huh.
It's not coming tomorrow.
It came yesterday. All right. No, but okay.
You didn't feel the sense of freedom?
Did you?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm a free Kenyan today.
Congratulations.
Asante sana. Asante sana. Welcome to the show. We have a packed show this morning. A number of things that we're going to be discussing. We'll be looking at what's happening in the country, what the president said yesterday, what he promised to do, what his thoughts are on the reopening of the economy and going forward as a country in his remaining 2 years of office. We also will be looking at internationally, what's happening in America.
What's not happening in America? I think there's so many things that are going on right now.
Surely.
I mean, we're going to go from COVID and the number of deaths that just seems to be increasing over the days. And then we see the protests that are going on as a result of the death of George Floyd, the whole racism conversation, necessary for it to be called a state of emergency, looking for systemic change, this, that, the other thing. So many things going on at the same time.
We will speak to people in America who are right there in the thick of things, and they'll tell us how thick the things are. And then also West African states.
So there's a lot going on here as well. There was a lot of clamor for change in terms of releasing the shackles of colonialism, finally, from France to certain West African or former French colonies. So maybe we shouldn't be using former. We're still quite current. But then with the ratification by France that they will no longer be receiving, funds from these countries, it seems that there's a new day.
Now they become former proper.
They become former proper.
Okay.
So we're having that conversation as well.
Yeah. And then we also will be discussing the ravages of COVID-19 on the local hotel industry. This is something even the president acknowledged in his speech. And he said, we are going to do something. We're going to show up the operations of hotels in the country. So we'll be speaking to the leader of the Hotel Owners Association to understand exactly what's happening when you see a hotel as old as the Fairmont Norfolk saying we are closing and all jobs are declared redundant. Everybody go home. We have closed. That is different from people saying that we are closing operations for now and we are sending our staff on unpaid leave, which is what the Serena has said. So we want to understand the difference between those two and exactly what's happening.
What does it mean?
And what's the future of everybody who was trained for the hospitality industry. But first, let's begin with our numbers, as we always do in the morning. COVID-19 in numbers in Kenya. How many new cases announced yesterday? 50-something.
So there were 56 new cases yesterday. And now if you look at the numbers overall in Kenya, now at 2,021 and 69 deaths. It's interesting because I think there were 5 deaths that were recorded yesterday. And that was, I think, the highest number in a day for a while now. And it has, I think it has the worry wrinkles now in at the Ministry of Health and other places. So, we're looking at higher numbers, cross the 2,000 point mark, and we're going to see those numbers increasing. However, I think it's interesting, though, that the number of tests have reduced.
What's happening with these tests?
I don't know what is going on. Because
so the tests keep going up, coming down?
Keep coming down. Last week, I think the highest number of tests we saw in one day was 3,077. And since that day, the tests have reduced significantly and under 2,000. We've not crossed over 2,000 since that day.
Yesterday was 1,518 samples.
Right. So it's hard to understand exactly where we are with that one, but that's what it looks like now.
It will be answered when you look at the papers because Cambry has run out of reagents.
All right, then. There's the answer, front and center. You don't need to go much further to figure that one out.
Nope.
It is unfortunate.
It's already clear this is what's happening. And then globally?
All right, so we're at 366,197. And we're looking at the deaths. Yesterday, the deaths in the United States were 103,875. Today, there are 106,925. So we're looking at upwards of 3,000 cases in the U.S. And their deaths, those are the deaths now, with cases
in the U.S.
In the U.S.
Okay.
Now, their cases have almost reached 2 million, with 1,859,323. So climbing up there quite steadily. Brazil yesterday was at 501,406. Today, they're at 529,405. So an increase of about 25,000 deaths in Brazil over the last 24 hours.
How many deaths?
30,046. Okay. Mexico still up there with, in the last 6 hours, having recorded 2,771 cases and 237 deaths. So the total number of cases in Brazil currently 93,435 with 10,167 deaths. So very quickly increase the number of cases that they had, but at the same time reach the 10%. This is over 10% now, the deaths that they're experiencing. Just under 11% of deaths in Mexico with the new caseload that we see. So that's a country where the world's eye is on currently. And then we see in that same area, Bolivia, Honduras, Guatemala also now increasing the number of cases that they've seen. So there seems to be some spread. And in terms of lockdown measures, Brazil hasn't been quite as vigilant in the past as they are now starting to be. And so we see a lot of the spread from Mexico now moving then towards, this is now Central America, now moving then towards South America. And, combined with the Brazil factor, what are the people of Brazil, those who are supporting the reopening of the economy, those who are demonstrating and urging that no lockdown happens, what are they saying now? Well, this is the thing. They're a bit upset about this, and they're saying that, okay, perhaps we moved a little bit too slow, too quickly. We saw...
too quickly?
No. In terms of reopening schools and reopening the economy, they moved too quickly. Previously, they probably they did say that they moved too slowly in terms of measures having to be applied, and it's unfortunate because this is the case around the world where schools have opened, children get infected, they are asked then to come back. We saw yesterday that. Rwanda said very clearly that with some of the cases that they see approaching their borders. They're going to go back indoors, guys. We're going back indoors. We're not even going to play with this thing.
Yeah, no more transport, no more
cases.
Yeah.
Border cases. And they said, no, it's not going to happen. Okay, so if you look at numbers around Africa, increasing, Nigeria with the highest number of cases in a day so far having been realized yesterday, which then pushes the number up to 10,578 in Nigeria. And if we want to look further south in South Africa is now at 34,357 cases with 705 deaths. So way below
the 10%.
Way below 10%. Way below 5% of deaths compared to the caseload, right? We still have Egypt following closely behind with 26,384 deaths. And the other North African countries are still in that same area there of 7,833 in Morocco, 9,513 in Algeria. And then it tapers down a little bit, whereby... Now, if we want to look at DRC has 3,195 cases with 72 deaths. However, as of yesterday... 3,000 cases.
Okay.
3,000. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I was telling
DRC.
Yes. So 3,000 plus cases in DRC.
And how many deaths?
So the number of deaths, 76.
76 deaths.
Yeah, sorry, 72 deaths.
72.
3,195 cases with 72 deaths. But yesterday, the second outbreak of Ebola has happened in the DRC. So look, COVID is not front and center. They had the first outbreak where they saw almost 200 people then get this. After 3 months of having them being declared Ebola-free, the second outbreak now occurred yesterday where they had to hospitalize somebody because of what they found. And so they're dealing with another...
They're dealing with big things.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important that we correct an impression that we gave yesterday, that DRC, because of Ebola, they are not even bothering about COVID. Clearly, they're testing.
No, they're testing.
If you see that they have 3,000 cases, it shows you that they are doing quite a widespread number of tests. And the number of deaths that have been reported as well, that's high. That's 72 deaths out of COVID-19. That is a very high number.
It is.
So it's actually also a big thing to consider.
It is, and I
DRC.
think also the healthcare system. Yeah, plus the healthcare system is quite strained as a result of Ebola. So now they're having to contend with these two things at the same time. And then this second outbreak is not helping matters either.
But it also, because of Ebola, it means that the healthcare system is alert. And that's why I think they're also able to test as much. They're able to have proper recording because the healthcare system is alert. They have been dealing with Ebola. So the healthcare workers, plus all the kind of support that they receive from whatever kind of support they receive from any other organizations, including the WHO, is quite to the top. So it's a DRC could be different from maybe Burundi that have decided openly that this is not. We are not really bothering with this. Could be different. 21 minutes after 6. Let's take a look at the weather, and then shortly we'll be looking at the newspaper headlines and what's happening around the world. Plus, let's see what Rwanda said yesterday, because there was a major announcement by the office of the Prime Minister of Rwanda, and a promise for more information to come out today. 21 after 6. This is a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Good morning.
It seems the chills are happening in Nairobi this morning. Right now at 13 degrees. It's clear skies, however. The chance of rain is quite high this Tuesday morning. 24 degrees high and lows of 12 today in the capital city. Let's take a look out into Nyeri, where it's mostly cloudy at 14 degrees. It'll be a wet afternoon, though, highs of 23. Nakuru is going to follow suit this morning at 14. It's partly cloudy. It's going to be rainy in the afternoon, however, with highs of 24. 13 degrees and partly cloudy in Eldoret. Highs of 23 with showers in the afternoon. It's 19 degrees and clear skies in Kisumu. That'll change, however, later with showers. Highs of 28. Looking then further west into Kakamega at 16 degrees. Partly cloudy this morning. Wet afternoon also is forecasted. 26 the high and lows of 16. Take into account that the weatherman has said that the rains are going to continue, and we need to look for, or we should look forward to, or prepare for extended rains throughout the next season. Malindi at 26 degrees is mostly cloudy. It will be a wet afternoon there. Highs of 29 and lows of 25. Mombasa will experience thunderstorms in the afternoon with highs of 28 and lows of 24. Take a look then into Kampala, where it's 21 degrees and mostly cloudy, highs of 26 and lows of 19, and showers expected later on. Dar es Salaam will follow suit with 29 the high and lows of 23. Currently at 24, there will be thunderstorms in the afternoon. Johannesburg at 7 degrees is chilly this morning. However, it'll change later on with a high of 22 and lows of 6. However, the sun will come peeking throughout the whole day. Lagos at 25 degrees is clear skies with periodic clouds this morning. Highs of 31 and lows of 25. Take a look into Europe, where Paris has us at clear skies at 17 degrees. We will see highs of 29 and lows of 16, where it'll be an extremely warm day. All right, let's take a look then into London. We're in London at 14 degrees, clear skies, highs of 26 and lows of 14 with partly cloudy conditions later on. And in New York, where it's just a few minutes going towards midnight, 18 degrees. When the sun does come up, there'll be partly cloudy conditions through the day, experiencing highs of 21 and lows of 14.
Okay, so what's happening around our region? We've just looked at the DRC, which has had a number of cases that were reported now. When was it? Yesterday's cases, right? 72 deaths, over 3,000 cases. This is way more than what we have in Kenya. Yeah. That means also that they have serious testing going on. So A statement from the Office of the Prime Minister in Rwanda yesterday said after reassessment, transportation between provinces and the city of Kigali, as well as passenger motor services, motor is boda boda, will remain closed until further notice in the interests of public health. Further COVID-19 measures will be announced by the Cabinet on the 2nd of June, today. So they started reopening. Remember, public transport had been banned across the country.
Yeah.
So they had started reopening and said, well, you can now, we can reopen the metropolitan of Kigali, sort of. And the public transportation was allowed. Passenger services, border services had been re-allowed. Now, after reassessment, they've said, no, this is not going to happen anymore because they have found 5 new cases on Sunday. 5 new cases of COVID-19 in the border district of Rusizi. They'll conduct mass testing there, but then safety first. So Rusizi is in the border with the DRC.
Right.
Remember we were asking, so are you saying that there's no more case even coming in? Now, the clarification as well is for the last couple of weeks, they have not had any case of community transmission.
They haven't.
They've just been receiving cases now of the border tests of imported cases. So, I mean, this is just because of 5 cases.
Shut it down. And 5 cases from outside the country, we're still going to shut down. So you can imagine how firm their resolve is to make sure that this is not going to happen. I think it's interesting as you bring that up, though, Eric, is that around the world, everybody seems to have backtracked on their opening up of the economies or opening up of certain sectors, from schools in France and Germany and Sweden to businesses that we can see, to transport systems in Rwanda. Everyone who has taken a step towards opening up, including China initially, when they opened up the first time, and then they saw that there was then transmission yet again, they pulled back and decided we're not going to go this way because maybe we did it a little bit too soon.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting that I looked specifically to say, is there any country that has opened up and then not rescinded on that decision? And there's none. Everybody who has opened up, we saw that there was a surge suddenly for whatever reason, and they've pulled back. Except for the United States, where things are just a little bit crazy across board, regardless of what they're looking at. So it's maybe we're going to teeter-tottering on that crossing line. Are we opening? Are we not? Is there a decision? Is it not? What's going to happen? And then boom, they kill George Floyd, and then nobody's talking about it anymore.
That story changes.
Yes, completely.
Focus is now different.
Totally different. But I just thought it was interesting that everybody now who had made a decision to open up went back on that decision because of what they saw. Whether it was children getting infected in schools, whether it was then community transmission, then taking a hike, or border towns then now bringing in new cases where they thought that they had been able to quell the situation, wasn't working.
Let's segue that into what the president said yesterday in his speech at State House, Nairobi, while commemorating Madaraka Day. He said that he'd like to see measures being put in place to start reopening the economy. Basically, he has told the education CS, look, I know that you've been getting some public participation on the views. Please fast track that. We'd like to see what do you have planned for the reopening of schools. What measures are you going to put in place to ensure that the children, and he said very clearly, the children, their parents, and their grandparents are safe. Okay? So it's not just reopening and for the sake of, he's still saying, I still want to know, if you reopen, how are we protecting those 3 generations? Children, their parents, and their grandparents.
That's interesting that he said that, I think, because also then taking into consideration the fact that a lot of children go to school, but they come back home.
Yep.
Every day. So they may be fine at home, but then if they go to school, how are we going to be sure that they're not getting in touch or not getting into any kind of danger as concerns infection, and then bringing it back home? Right.
And then you're bringing it back home to the vulnerable, the elderly, the grandparents. I think that's where the push was. But also he asked the Interior CS, Fred Matiang'i, to fast-track the conversation with the churches. Because, like he said, I share the heavy hearts of all the faithful who can no longer congregate and share in worship of the Almighty. I told you, when these meetings with the church leaders start happening, we are being led towards something.
Something's cooking.
And the pressure from the church is a pressure that no government is able to withstand. It appears.
It's interesting that you say that, because in Nigeria, church today a discussion is being held. A decision is going to be made today about allowing churches across the country open. I think that was just interesting because we saw
Pressure
that
from
announcement come
church
out
is
yesterday.
pressure that no government is able to withstand. None. Like now, there's pressure coming from the churches, and the president is saying, "Well, yeah, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, and I'm asking the CS to have this conversation with you guys so we can see." I think the first thing we're going to see is, despite us having that conversation last week, where a majority of the people who were calling in were saying, "Look, please do not reopen churches yet," and here we are. We're talking about reopening of churches. The report that was given to the CS for Education, Professor Magoha, indicated that the committee is recommending the reopening of schools from September. Well, we don't know whether they're saying reopen for everybody or just the candidates or whoever, but there's talk of reopening schools from September.
Yeah.
What measures are going to be in place? Some of these schools are where the isolation centers and quarantine centers are.
Yeah. And unfortunately, look, the way things have been going, Eric, over the last 3 months, and the way in which we've seen the practice of these measures, I am a bit nervous then about if this is the same application that is going to be put through for children when they go back to school. If we operate the way we've been operating and then open schools, it's going to
We've
be
basically left, you know what Mutahi Kagwe was called, this younger generation, the mosquitoes. They are walking around with the virus. It's not affecting them in any way, but they are the ones that are infecting others.
Exactly.
It's a mosquito. So can you imagine now having that young demographic of kids congregating,
I shudder.
pass from one to the other,
I
and then
shudder
go
to
back
imagine.
home and take it?
I shudder to imagine. I cannot. I can't.
And there's absolutely, we cannot have a conversation about how children are going to maintain social distance, how children are going to... Children can maintain some things. They learn, and even Dr. Mercy has been telling us here often, once children learn how to wash their hands, they keep insisting on wash your hands.
Yes.
They keep insisting on how to sneeze into your elbow. They'll keep insisting on all these things, but children must play.
They will
And
not
play is
keep social
contact sport.
distance.
There's a lot of pressure right now when children are at home from parents to see how their children can play, because children want to go out, children want to play. Maybe the younger ages will not be allowed to go back to school. The older ones probably will be allowed to go back to school. Those that are expected to be a bit more responsible. The teenagers in Form 4, the young adults in university and colleges who need to do their final exams. Probably those ones are the ones that are going to be asked to do this.
Right.
Let's wait and see.
Let's see.
We're taking a look at newspaper headlines this morning, what the president said yesterday, what else is happening today. We know that Professor Margaret Kamar is likely to be the new Deputy Speaker of the Senate by the end of day today.
Yep.
This is just crystal ball, right? Yeah.
Something. A little bird whispered something into your
A little
ear. It
bird
would be-
whispered something, and I saw a tweet by the Senate Majority Whip. 27 minutes to 7 o'clock. This is a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. In the room this morning, Eric Latif and Nduoko.
All right, so yesterday was a holiday and there was nobody on the road. Today, that has changed quite significantly because right around 6:30, already Joko Road is a jam, literally, from Hamza all the way to the City Stadium roundabout that then takes you into the CBD. It's crazy. So I don't know exactly what's going on there, but this is what we see. Wayaki Way is moving very slowly this morning, and that's towards the CBD. It takes us all the way up past Kangemi on the 87, and so then that brings traffic then to almost a standstill right around the Westlands roundabout. But I'm seeing that would move openly in a bit. Juja Road is looking good, flowing smoothly. Coming off Thika Road is not too much of a headache right now. Mombasa Road is treating you kindly as well, not giving you too much drama, but we know that's going to change right around 7:30, where we will see a hold up right around Cabanas and then moving towards General Motors. Other than that, it doesn't look too bad in other parts of the city. We'll take a look into other towns in the country in a short while. If you do see something we should know about, do let us know. Spice FMKE on Twitter. We want to keep it moving this Tuesday morning, and we're going to need your help.
25 to 7. This is the situation. Now, let's take a look at the headlines. The President of the Republic of Kenya is a seer.
Okay. That's what the headline says?
Yeah.
Eric's headline.
He's discerning something, right? I'm already discerning a constitutional moment, not a moment to replace the 2010 constitution, but one to improve on it. A moment that will right what we got wrong in 2010. This is what you were saying. And that's a headline today in the Standard, why it cannot wait any longer. In his most clear statement yet delivered in the first ever virtual ceremony, the president says Kenya is ripe for constitutional change, setting the stage for a new round of political battle. And he says, well, basically, it cannot wait any longer. We have to look at how we do our things, and we've got to find a way of what we need to do. A constitution is not an end in itself. It's a means to a greater end. It is a living document. And if certain elements of the constitution outlive their historical purposes, they become a cancer. They must be removed, or they will infect the good elements of the mother law.
And he seems to say that now is the perfect time to do this.
Yep.
Now is the time to institute that change.
Yep.
Before we go to a place where now new leaders are being selected.
Yep.
Have a plan. And the plan is this constitution. The plan is the changes that you would essentially make to the constitution in order to allow the country move forward. So this is perfect time. Hammer, nail, go. So this is what he seems to say here.
He's basically saying the BBC reggae is now being played again. BBI, sorry, yes, the BBI. Yes, the BBC.
Yes, it is.
Who's BBC? The BBI reggae is now being played again. It was on pause. It was not stopped. We need political leaders totally committed to promoting not self, but what will transform the lives of our people, in line with what our founding fathers yearned for. Indeed, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, we need political leaders not in love with money, but in love with justice. Not in love with publicity, but in love with humanity.
It would be great to see that day in a lot of countries on the continent. It would be really great.
That's what we need. It's a dream. Remains a dream.
He says also, and this is on the phrase, we cannot reimagine our nationhood without, this is President Uhuru Kenyatta, we cannot reimagine our nationhood without changing our political architecture. And we cannot change this architecture without re-engineering our constitution. So this seems like this is what is going to happen.
Yeah. But I think the main thing that he's talking about, and this is why it's good that he brings out these issues, because this is the main sticking point, even publicly. But I think it's also important that he ought to have pushed the whole idea of values. And I saw that he mentioned the issue of values, describing the loss of national values, roots for reset of the bottom to reward only the selfless, honest and hard workers. And, making the constitution more about the other side that we may have missed, the soft side, making the Kenya a nation and not just a country, like Barack Muluka was telling us yesterday. Not just a country defined by geographical borders, but Kenya being a nation of peoples, right? And that is something that we still keep missing in our constitutional moments.
I think people have not come to grips with nationhood and culture and, using tradition and culture even to build a state of nationhood. I think most Kenyans have not resonated with that quite yet. But it's not leaders who are going to do that. It's not leaders who are going to make that happen. It's got to be a combined effort from people to leaders, across board. Until you get that sense, until you have that penny drop moment for people across the country, unfortunately, something has to happen for that feeling to come upon you.
Something's got to give.
Yeah, it has to. It's not just something that drops from heaven. Something has to reverberate through the nation for you to feel that way.
I wonder what the new proposed architecture will look like. We saw the draft BBI report, and the BBI report that time was telling us, it was completely, not telling us anything. It was proposing to have a prime minister who has absolutely no powers, who's coming from parliament. It was proposing to have, ministers, half the cabinet coming from parliament, the other half coming from outside parliament. And then during the BBI talks and the rallies that we saw around the country, what was being called the moment where we're now getting feedback from the public. That talk changed.
Yeah, completely.
And it was, we must have a powerful prime minister and we must have a semi-powerful president and a head of government coming from parliament. So let's see what kind of document the new BBI report presents.
It'll be interesting.
What kind of architecture, the political architecture, like the president was calling it, the political architecture, that's going to lead us to a point where we are no longer having all these manenos.
Well, it's interesting that on the front page of The Nation, the question is the Ruto camaraderie back? But just above that, anxiety ahead of Jubilee meeting. While the agenda of the party's parliamentary group meeting at State House today has not been disclosed, more heads are expected to roll at the gathering, where Deputy President will face rivals from Rift Valley, KANU's Gideon Moi and CCM's Isaac Ruto. So maybe the love lasted but a moment yesterday. You could see Things
it.
are going to
The
change
camaraderie,
today.
they were even exchanging notes,
They
laughing.
did. An elbow bump here and there.
Yeah. And then they're dressed in the same, just like before. Suit and red tie
That
and
may
white
change
shirt.
today.
And maybe not. Maybe this is getting to a point where Ruto, according to what we are seeing, Ruto has told his troops, you guys, all right, let's just do a retreat. Just tone down, let's allow the president to do what he wants to do, and then we will re-emerge. Maybe once we've seen the clear picture of what he wants to do, then we know where to attack.
Yeah.
Probably that's it. So today there's a PG, right? That's happening at State House. And according to page 6 of the Standard, Duale Washiali top list of Ruto allies facing the chop at the Jubilee PG.
Nobody wants to be late for that one.
Yep. So today, maybe the day when Duale finally gets that chop and he exits, and let's see who else gets the chop or whatever happens now to them. Washiali as well, the Senate, the National Assembly whip Benjamin Washiali. Let's see what happens to them today. Emmanuel Wangwe of Nafahoro will take over from Washiali, while the Budget and Appropriations Committee, which is chaired by Kimani Ichung'wah, will be replaced by Kieni's Kanini Kega, according to sources. Deputy Majority Leader Cecily Mbarire, who's nominated, will be replaced by Igembe North MP Malcolm Aure. And those are now some of the lineups that we are seeing. Changes in all committees.
Be interesting to see.
Eh.
So at the end of this day, some people will not be very happy. Others will. Let's see how it happens. But you're likely to see a lot of the political
some changes.
Musical chairs will continue to play out.
Yeah. So that issue of Margaret Kamar, before we move to other headline, the Senate is this afternoon electing a new deputy speaker. With Wasing issues, Margaret Kamar expected to replace ousted Tharaka Nithi Senator Kithure Kindiki. By yesterday, it was expected that most candidates eyeing the seat would withdraw from the race in favor of Professor Kamar. Script is always written the same way and it unfolds the same way. Majority Whip Irongo Kangata and Minority Leader Mutula Kilonzo Jr. spoke about Minority Whip as well, not leader, spoke about the possibility of Kamar carrying the day in the election that is set for 2:30 p.m.
Yeah.
Senators Isaac Moro of Jubilee, Judith Pareno of ODM, Stuart Madzaya of ODM, Charles Kebiru, who's an independent, had expressed interest in the seat, but we saw Stuart Madzaya had released a statement by the end of the day yesterday saying, after consultations with his party, his colleagues, his friends, his family, and especially the party leader, Raila Odinga, he had decided to withdraw from the race.
Right.
And, so we expect to see the same from Isaac Mora. We expect to see the same from Charles Kebiru, the independent senator from Kirinyaga. Margaret Kamar, shoe in.
Yep. Done deal, it seems, even from this morning. By the time she's having her coffee this morning, she knows that the afternoon
she's
will give her a
dressing for
different
the
position.
day. She's dressing for the day. She knows by the end of this day she'll be all over in the newspapers. So she's choosing her attire for the day, knowing this photo moment.
I'm going to have quite a lot of photos taken.
Yes.
And interviews had.
Yes. So let's go back to other stories.
All right, so more parents protest at demand for second-term fees. More parents have protested at private schools, interestingly enough. Now, private schools have made a demand for second-term fees because they were pursuing this whole, online learning, etc. The Education Ministry is, however, saying that this payment should be voluntary. The latest is Shani Schools, which operates 4 institutions in Nairobi and which has been asking parents for e-learning fees. It joins McKinney Schools and Brookhouse, which are also at loggerheads with parents over demands for fees. But the Education Ministry said it was yet to release for the second-term opening date. Parents at Shani Schools have accused management of demanding 30,000 shillings and more from each learner for online learning, including those in kindergarten. We're going through a difficult period where most parents have been taking pay cuts, they say, unpaid leave, or made huge business losses. We request management to consider extending fee discounts to parents, considering that most schools' amenities will not be used by learners during this period. This is a letter to the school management. However, management said the school depends on school fees to run its operations. Despite the fact that Shani is affordable, our overheads are very high compared to schools within our locality. We implore you to help us keep the school and staff afloat through your timely school fees payments. So that kind of went in one ear and went out the other.
Okay, so first, all right. So, the parents of Shani School enrolling their children for e-learning, like, are the children sitting down and getting engaged by teachers from Shani School?
Yes.
Then pay
For second term?
for whatever the service that you're receiving.
No, but they say that second term, even if now it's second, this is the thing. They're saying it's second term. But according to the Ministry of
Well,
Education,
the government, it's not second term.
that's the thing. This is the bone of contention.
But the
These
thing
schools
is,
are saying
so
that
the thing is, okay, we can call it whatever. It's not second term syllabus. It's second term of
Whatever.
everything else. It's second term of learning. All right. So if every day your child gets up, sits by a computer and receives instructions from a teacher who is also sitting somewhere by a computer and delivering these instructions, there's service being offered. Right? And there's a timetable that's being followed. And you also know that timetable. It's not that a teacher is waking up today, I don't feel like teaching you today. No, there's actually a timetable. And there's expectations from both ends. So maybe we are not advancing the syllabus in what we should have been learning this time, according to the KICD syllabus, but you're learning something.
But they're asking for a discount, all things being considered.
So they're not, and then the school is saying, look, guys, but
that's understood. The same way you're complaining, the same way they're complaining about suffering, the same way these parents are also suffering.
Of course.
They've lost their businesses. They've been forced to go on
That's
leave.
true.
They've lost their jobs.
That's
so
true.
there needs to be some kind of balance here. You can't ask for full-term fees for online learning where I have to also provide some of the amenities that are necessary for learning, and I also have to provide some kind of supervisory role. So it can't be the full amount as if they were going to school and,
And it doesn't
was
matter
at
anyway,
normal.
by the way. Even when the schools reopen, even if we say the schools reopen in September, you must be prepared to offer a discount.
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody
is suffering this thing.
Yes, everybody has suffered. The other schools that we're seeing offering international curriculum, the big schools, parents were conducting their own internal surveys and showing that many of them have lost their incomes. Now, that was like 2 months ago. What do you think is happening now?
There's nothing in the hand now.
Yeah. It's the same thing that's happening across the country.
Yeah, you're
so
right.
you
That's
must be
interesting.
prepared. Whenever schools reopen,
That's
you
an
must be
interesting
prepared to
perspective that I
advance.
didn't think about that. Even then, even when schools do open, forget about all this discussion about now online learning, this, that, the other story. Even when schools open in September or whenever they will open,
People will
January,
be
whenever,
broke, man.
people are not going to have money to send their children to school. Because right now, that money is being expended on survival, right? Then throw in the school option. There has to be room for discounts or at least staggered payments, and none of this threat of we're going to kick your children out of school. That also has to be considered and discussed.
There's absolutely no way. You can't expect that somebody who has been working at Serenhat, Fairmont, the Norfolk, suddenly they have actually zero income.
Yeah.
And then you're telling them that your child is still learning. Yes, my child is still learning. I understand.
But I
really
am going to need a little bit of time to wrap my head around this and what I'm
Yes.
going to do.
Yeah.
It's true. So,
There's this one. This is on page 8 of the Standard. Kelvin Aura. You remember that name?
yes, I do.
Kelvin Aura is the man who had driven a vehicle from Nairobi to Kadede village, Kamser Seka sublocation, Rambira location in Rachonyo North sub-county in April. He had taken mourners with an empty coffin to attend a burial. This was a driver. Remember that whole story?
Yep.
And then this driver tested positive then for COVID-19. And then he heard that he would be held in a police cell after being discharged from a Homa Bay COVID-19 treatment center. He is now disillusioned. He was discharged on Saturday and he has spent 46 days in an isolation ward and could not understand the turn of events. The 27-year-old is a driver. Since then, he has been isolated at Maela COVID-19 treatment center in the sub-county since he tested positive. When he was released at about 11:30 a.m. on Saturday, he knew that he'd go for a 14-day self-quarantine in his Nairobi home as instructed by medical personnel. His second tribulation began when he arrived at Kendu Bay police station to pick his vehicle. The vehicle had been moved to the police station when he was in quarantine at Homa Bay Kenya Medical Training College in April. Aura said while at the police station, he was told that he'd be charged for giving false information. I fainted after realizing that I was being held instead of going for self-quarantine in my house for 14 days. Now he's being held in a police station. He was released and instructed to report to the office of the DCI today. Armed with appropriate documentation from the health officials, the youth was allowed to travel to Nairobi. I do not know why I am being charged. I only expected to be in quarantine, in self-quarantine. He's a resident of Mumias in Kakamega County. He lives in Nairobi, where he works as a driver for a transport company. He decried the financial challenges orchestrated by his isolation because he has not paid 2 months' house rent, that is 30,000 shillings. He has only 2,500 shillings on him. That's why he's appealing to lawyers and human rights organizations to rescue him. 46 days, first of all, in isolation ward. Why was he there for 46 days?
First of all, the 14 days took, and then he was, interesting enough, because we heard his plea at some point. The first 14 days elapsed, right? The second 14 days elapsed. And unfortunately, the third 14 days elapsed. And after that is when they started testing him. They started testing him on a regular basis. According to what his story was, is that they would test him because you need to do in 24 hours 2 tests. Both of them need to have been found negative in order for you then to be released.
To be declared negative.
To be declared negative. So for every test that he took from the third batch of 14 days, he never got one set of tests that read the same. It was always negative, positive, positive, negative, positive, negative, and that is how it has been.
And all this
so
time,
this is why he
says
that
he
there's
does
some
not
kind of foul
examine.
play
He's
here.
completely asymptomatic.
Nothing.
Throughout this period, he's
Nothing.
wondering, so what's it? What are you saying?
Absolutely nothing. He has not felt a sniffle, a cough, a pain, anything, anywhere.
And so even after saying that, well, you're being released after you've tested negative, why do you need to go and self-quarantine for 14 days?
For what? Because you're free of the virus, no? Yes. This is it. He's quite a frustrated fellow, Kelvin, unfortunately. From the very beginning of this entire saga, whereby he was doing a job, he drove some folks somewhere, right? And he didn't see the danger in what he did. The danger, of course, is ever present and near. However, then from this, he seems to have suffered a lot more. The people that he drove have long gone home and, been released. But in his case, this is something different.
It's an interesting one.
Yes,
but also very unfortunate that somebody has been kept in isolation and quarantine for 46 days, going into 50 days, and after that he's still being given mixed signals. You are going to be charged. You're not going to be charged. You gave false information. Just because probably he recorded that video. Remember, he recorded a video and said, guys,
here I am on the balcony. Yes, he did.
The other story that's quite disheartening is Kemri runs out of reagents amid protests by returnees. So there are two stories in one here. One story is that Kemri has resorted to manual testing of coronavirus due to lack of reagents. I don't understand what manual testing is. But the second story is that there's a group that arrived. Remember, the repatriation flights? That flight from Dubai came to JKIA about a month ago. This group was taken to KMTC. Nope, the tests were taken, but they have not received their results. 14 days have lapsed. Nobody's talking to us. We have finished the mandatory 14-day quarantine. We need to go home, but they're not giving us our results. This is according to Bakari Ahmed, who arrived in the country from Dubai on May 14th. But last evening, the returnees told us that they have to be tested again as their samples could not be traced. Initially, Matilo Mwau, the Kemri deputy director, said the delay could be due to the fact that they have resorted to manual testing because of lack of reagents needed for automatic tests.
But
even though Kemri had said that they have the capacity to test thousands of samples in a day, it's becoming impossible to do so because of what Professor Mwau terms as acute shortage of reagents globally.
No. Sorry. It's global, but countries have been able to secure what they needed to have this thing done.
And
right?
also, those two are not related.
They're not
But
related
it's
in any
possible
way,
that
shape, or form.
You're having difficulties, acquiring the reagents in time and being able to roll them out. Okay, let's just assume that, yes, that's the truth. How does that relate to missing tests, missing samples?
Samples disappearing. These guys were already tested.
Samples taken.
They were tested. The samples were taken, right?
And now they're being
now
told,
they're missing. Where did they go?
Mutapimwa tena.
No.
Hizo zenu sijui ziko wapi.
There's a problem here. And we started hearing from a while ago, we started hearing, the warning bells of this thing, that there was going to be a problem, even from the very beginning. And we started hearing about, global shortage around the world, everybody suffering from this thing. No, countries are testing. South Africa testing rigorously. Uganda testing. Rwanda testing. It can't be a crutch that is used every time. And then you hear in the midst of all this that some samples have disappeared. There are no reagents, this, that, the other thing. It can't be. Kemri resorting to manual testing after all this could explain why we see the dip. In the testing.
We only had over 2,000 2 days.
Yes.
Over 2,000 of daily tests.
The very next day.
Just for 2 days, and then now we're back to 1,000, 1,500 new cases. And how much money have we dedicated to COVID in our budget? How much money has been dedicated to this? And then you're telling me that we still are not able to test.
It's the same place where we were when this all
DRC is testing more than us. Rwanda is still able to test. Uganda is testing. South Africa is
out of the park. They hit it out of the park a while ago.
This man called Joel Migwe, who's also quarantined at KMTC, says even the normal tests such as checking their temperatures and other symptoms that was being done earlier by medics has stopped.
Because?
The screening.
Why?
Guys, the medics are tired.
Okay, everybody's tired.
How else would you describe this? They're coming every day, let's see your temperature and recording somewhere twice a day. Now they're like, nyinyi mko sawa.
It's okay.
Yesterday
you were fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ukisikia joto unipigie.
Just tell me, I'll check you out. Okay, so hope still rises. A Kenyan bird has completed 26,000-kilometer journey to return home. On, the famous Kenyan bird that recently captivated online bird lovers after defying all odds to fly more than 8,000 kilometers from Kenya to China in 5 days, today outdid itself by completing 26,000 kilometers to finally find a home in northern Mongolia.
It has landed in Mongolia?
Yes, near the Russian border, where it will settle down to breed this winter. The wonder bird left Mongolia on the 8th of June 2019 and was tagged there using a global location sensor to monitor its movements. And now she Abby, will breed there. She was last detected on Kenyan territory on the 29th of April, creating a sensation online for defying the odds at a time hundreds of Kenyans were stuck in foreign countries. So she's going to breed this winter, and let's hope that she will actually make it.
So the bird is Kenyan?
Yes. She's Kenyan.
Oh, it left Kenya.
We don't know where she was egged or hatched. But look, she left here, so it's said that she's from here.
Went all the way to China to Mongolia now.
Yes. She's a 4-year-old fish-eating bird, and she was caught by a fisherman in Lake Victoria in Siaya County. Oh, this other one, rather, that died of starvation. Yeah. This is the other bird, right, that flew from Finland. But now this is hoping that now that she's gone to Mongolia and she'll stay there for the winter to breed, On will be one of the world's best tourist sensations.
Where is Elon Musk? Tell him we can also fly a bird.
Spread the word.
We can also launch something from Kenya and it goes all the way to Mongolia. How many kilometers are those?
26,000.
How many kilometers to the space station? Yeah, we are rivaling Elon Musk as well. Today's proverb, as we come to the top of the hour: if your friend is honey, do not lick him thoroughly. If your friend is honey, do not lick him thoroughly. This is from Tunisia. Basically, it's just telling you, just what you're given, take it. Don't go for more.
Okay.
What you're given, take it. There's no need to go for more. Don't be greedy.
Don't be a glutton.
Yes. If your friend is honey, do not lick him thoroughly. Good morning. It's 7 o'clock.
So there seems to be a bad accident on Mombasa Road this morning, unfortunately, right around the SGR. A trailer, a vehicle, some motorcycles. It's an absolute mess there, and it's going to compound traffic from what we see already, coming from the Greater Mombasa Road, then down towards the SGR and even further down. You're not going to get to the airport junction in a hurry this morning because of what we see. So please approach with caution. This is what we see happening. Right now, you will then, I think, be allowed to use the road behind the SGR leading to the ICD, the Inland Container Depot, and then out then through General Motors. There's an option for you. But using the main road now is a no-go zone because of that accident. All right, we saw that there was traffic right around Jogo Road. It still is the case. That might change in a short while, but for now you need to be careful. Because it's going to take you a little bit longer. All right, so then coming off of Thika Road into the CBD, we have a little bit of slow movement there because of, heightened traffic. Everybody's going back into the city this morning. We'll take a look at how it looks like shortly. Spice FMKE, that's how you can reach us on Twitter. Let us know what you see, but you should be fine for now.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth.
Spice FM KE on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And wherever you're listening from, whether in Malindi 97.7, Nyeri 90.9, Eldoret 96.7, 96.0 in Nakuru, 102.5 Kisumu, 87.9 in Mombasa, or 94.4 in Nairobi. Welcome to the Situation Room. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. In the room this morning is Nduoko and Eric Latif. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about America. This is America.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot going on or not going on. It was interesting because we've seen the reports coming out of the world, across the world. It's what everybody's talking about. But 30 years ago, they were talking about the same thing with the Rodney King riots that took place in the US. 30 years ago, they're having the same conversations that they were about racism, specifically against African Americans. And if you just want to start on that premise, it's sad that, for 3 decades, you've been having the same conversation. Nothing has been done about it. If anything, it has become even worse. But then the question is, how do you change people's psyche? Because this is a state of mind. It's a state of mind that has now then permeated the system that then, is prejudiced against certain people. Mm-hmm. But it all started from a state of mind. All of what we see, the riots, the killings, the lynchings, the fires, etc., are all byproducts of a state of mind. So how do you change a state of mind? And is it necessary then for the whole country to stand up, as they've been asking over the last, 30 years?
Is this state of mind genetic?
It's interesting because it seems it would
because
be.
The mind of 30 years ago and the mind of 2020,
it's not the same. It's not the same folks, right?
Yeah.
It seems as something that you pass on to your children. And as inflammatory as it may sound, the way that you pass on the message to your children is that you as an African American will also be discriminated against. So that's something that you have to watch and think about. It's never that, you're entering into a new way of doing things as we raise you.
There's endless possibilities and opportunities for you here.
Young African Americans are being raised to believe that they will be discriminated against by virtue of that they are a certain skin color. So we can take that to the other side of that argument and say then that others who then propagate this discrimination and racism are also raised in the same manner. That you are, or they're socialized or conditioned to think that by virtue of their skin color, they're better.
This thing is systemic.
It is.
If you look at the kind of documentaries and all that, come out of the States, a number of them now on Netflix, and you're looking at the stories of how young boys are incarcerated, just arrested on trumped-up charges, taken through a system, proper criminal justice system, taken through court, and then you end up in jail, now in prison. And what the kind of treatment that you also receive in prison and the kind of rights that you enjoy while in prison or even trying to go through the appeal process, it shows that it is completely systemic. It's a system. When Trayvon Martin was killed by that vigilante, Zimmerman, in the Obama era, you'd have assumed that, now with Obama sitting in the White House, with Obama having come through working with the communities in the black communities in Chicago, you'd assume that, he'd have been able to move something. He came, he spoke, and you could still see that there's frustration even from him in how can we really change this thing.
He couldn't do much about
Topple
it.
the apple cart.
Yeah.
It was difficult. We're having the same conversation this year, and it's not the first time. Well, George Floyd now we are seeing what has happened to George Floyd, a knee on the neck. Just before that, there was the other guy who was jogging, and this chap just decided because we had seen you entering a house, we are therefore going to shoot you and kill you, and go and claim that we were acting in self-defense, that you had attacked us. Despite video evidence coming out and the system taking so long to take action against the perpetrators, the clear perpetrators of the violence. How long has it taken for this police officer to be arrested in the George Floyd case?
It took a couple of days.
Video is out, video is circulating.
The world has seen it.
The world has seen it. And the conversation is not coming out straight to say, no, we condemn this. We are taking action against this. There's, come on, you guys, calm down. We need to investigate. What do you mean? There's a whole issue here of how can this system change?
And I know that the conversation now is that people in this part of the hemisphere are saying, well, so why are we having this conversation and how does it then affect us on this side of the pond? And that is the thing, that it does affect us on this side of the pond because a country that you seen as a world power, a country that you trade with, a country that you immigrate to, one to the other. There is a problem if we're not able to see how it does connect us one to the other. And the calls for this to be called a state of emergency, I think is absolutely necessary at this point. And to say that, you know what, it actually cannot continue like this because prejudice against one is prejudice against many. Discrimination against one is discrimination against very, very many. And so there is a clear connection. There's a clear connection between what we see here and what we see in other parts of the world. So that is the conversation that's being had now. The protests are wild in the United States and indeed around the world for people to say, look, this cannot continue in this way. The one country that you see as is going to be the leader, and then it seems that inside the system itself is shambolic in nature, then you're going to want to question about, really, are you able to lead the world when your internal mechanism doesn't seem to be working quite right? I mean, and there you can see the clear connection there. And who are we following if the leader seems to have a problem within?
When you had the LA riots, the Rodney-King riots so many years ago, people then who were rioting expected to see some change. Was there change?
Was there change?
Was there any kind of movement? Because maybe you can say it's incremental. At that point, we gained this, and now 10 years later, we had more riots, we gained this and the other, because we've been having, this is not, it's become a normal thing. There's always going to be somebody who's complaining about the mistreatment or maltreatment of the black community by the system in America.
I think you always find somebody complaining about the system because there is always something being done. There is always some kind of injustice that's being carried out. So there's always something to complain about, unfortunately. That somebody somewhere is discriminating against another individual by virtue of the fact that they can. And because of the fact that justice doesn't seem to be carried out, it seems then that this injustice is being allowed, unfortunately. So this is where we stand at this point to say that it's been allowed over and over and over again. The number of deaths, people can count them off and not have enough fingers to go through the cases of people who have been shot and their perpetrators have not been brought to book. However, if you look at the flip side of it, the jails are full of African Americans. the system seems to want to lean heavily against African Americans. So what message are you putting out there?
And not all of them are there by virtue of, because they deserve to be there. Like when Netflix released that documentary, When They See Us, about the Central Park 5, right? 1989, some young lady is, found murdered, assaulted and raped in New York Central Park. And then these young boys are rounded up and they go through a system. They go to jail. They spend years in jail. And they even come out and the story is told globally that this is what happened, that we were actually there, we were wrongly incarcerated. And here, it doesn't seem to change anything. It doesn't seem to change this conversation.
Right.
So I go back to saying there's a system that we are unable to basically unlock.
Can we though?
Having so many people, Martin Luther King, his children, we have all these people who have Al Sharpton and the rest, people who have held these conversations and tried to push and try to have, getting into Congress, getting into the Senate, trying to push things, getting into the White House in the end,
literally,
and still this thing is not changing. Because what we saw with George Floyd is not different from what you see many years prior.
Oh no, it isn't. And look,
somebody's actually even there. The difference now this time is that there's evidence. There's live evidence of what's happening on video that can be shared globally, and you can see this police officer arresting the guy, placing a knee on his neck. The man is complaining, "I can't breathe." The man is trying to plead. He's already in handcuffs, and the guy dies right there, as everybody sees. But the system takes forever to react to that.
This is the problem. Yeah, there is a problem because the question has been, why is it that you've not been able to make these arrests? And why did it take so long for this arrest to be made? And, as the world looks at it, the rest of the country then has blown up. In the sense that now everybody is rioting, everybody is protesting and saying, this cannot be the way in which we continue to do things. It is not right. Why did it take a couple of days before then somebody was arrested? Why did it take so long before somebody did something?
Before action is taken.
And then what is the charge that's then being brought against him? Unfortunately, it's third-degree murder.
Third degree.
So
third degree, as in like he didn't know. There are people who are saying, there are very many thousands upon thousands of good police officers in the United States. We only have a few bad apples in the United States who are tainting the image of the police service. But the police has reformed over years. There's some professions where you cannot have bad apples. Having a bad police officer, someone calling them a bad apple, is like having the medical profession saying, you know what? Majority of our doctors are really good doctors. We just have a few bad apples who like watching their patients die. You can't have that. You cannot justify that. Or even Kenya Airways saying majority of our pilots are really good pilots. They're professional. They're well trained. They conduct themselves very well. But you just have a few bad apples who like directing their planes onto mountains, flying onto mountains. Those are just a few bad apples. Who'll fly into a mountain or who'll crash their plane. We cannot call that a bad apple. There are some situations that do not deserve to have something called a bad apple.
Yeah, I think though also there's also this satisfaction that a lot of people have. I don't know if to call it satisfaction or complacency or realizing that the system is not going to do anything to them if they behaved in this manner. And I think the system has buffered, or the system has protected, unfortunately, a lot of these folks for too long.
We're going to take a short break, take a look at weather at 7:15. This is a situation with Kenya's biggest conversation. And then when we come back, we will cross over to the United States and start speaking to a couple of people there. One of them is a social commentator who's in Florida, USA. His name is Cornelius West. What did I say? Cornelius West.
Yes.
And then we have TJ Addington. He is an author and community leader in Chicago. We want to speak to them to get a perspective of what's happening and also just report what we are seeing now in the news. What has President Donald Trump said? He has said, well, you guys, if you don't behave, I'm going to deploy the military. This is how I'm going to quell these riots. The riots are happening across the country. What exactly is happening in the United States? We'd like for you also to join in the conversation. 0719 012 600. Good morning.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM.
All right, let's look at how things have changed this morning. The sun is peeking out in certain parts of Nairobi. Clear skies for certain parts, but then we go into rains later on. Highs of 24. And in Nyeri at 14 degrees, it's mostly cloudy. Highs of 23 with showers to be experienced in the afternoon. Nakuru is clear skies right now. Partly cloudy conditions to follow at 15 degrees with showers expected later and highs of 24. In Eldoret at 13 degrees this morning. Partly cloudy conditions, we'll see highs of 23 with rain showers later. Kisumu at 19 degrees is clear skies. However, that will change later. It's going to be a wet afternoon across the country. In Kakamega at 26 and in Malindi at 29. In Mombasa at 28, it'll be rain showers all through most parts of mid-morning into the afternoon. All right, let's take a look then into Kampala at 21 degrees, partly cloudy conditions and wet conditions in the afternoon with highs of 26 and lows of 19. Dar es Salaam this morning is mostly cloudy. It'll be partly cloudy through the day, highs of 29. And then into Johannesburg, where it's clear skies at 7 degrees, highs of 23 and lows of 6. Lagos, finally for now, at 24 degrees. It's clear skies all through, and then partly cloudy conditions in the afternoon with highs of 31 and lows of 24.
It's a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation right here on Spice FM at www.spicefm.co.ke. We're live streaming the show throughout the world. We're also live streaming on Facebook, Spice FM KE on Facebook, Spice FM KE on Twitter, as well as Spice FM KE on YouTube. Well, you can call us in on 0719 012 600, or you can join the conversation via our social media platforms. That is Spice FM KE, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, So we are discussing what's happening in the United States. We are seeing a lot of what's happening in the United States. Since the killing of George Floyd, there's a lot that we have seen, happening across the states. And now we're going to cross over and speak to two people who are in the United States. One of them is Colonel West. He is a social commentator who is in Florida, USA. And this gentleman is going to give us basically just paint the picture for us of exactly what's happening there, wherever he is in Florida, USA. Good morning, Cornelius. I know it's late evening for you. How are you?
I'm doing very good. I want to give my blessings to everyone that invited me to the show. And good morning. It's late, but I'm not tired. I work out a lot, so I was looking forward to the interview. Right now, I reside in Tampa, Florida. Mm-hmm. And do I have the opportunity to just share my experience right now, or
yes.
you going to ask me a question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, yes, please go ahead, Cornelius.
Yes. One thing that's happening right here in Tampa, Florida, I think, is I think the people got comfortable and thought that the young Braves and Kings and Queens were not going to react to what was going to happen. And the only why I call them young Braves and Kings and Queens is because you go back to, I don't know if y'all ever watched Cowboys and Indians, mm-hmm. right?
Yep.
Or even in the African culture, you have chiefs and tribal leaders, and sometimes the chief and tribal leaders can't tell the young folks what to do because they have no hope, and they go do what they want to do. So what's happening right now, the young Braves is not listening to the chiefs. Right now, you can't name one person that the young people will listen to at all. They won't listen to T.D. Jakes. They won't listen to who else out there? Jesse Jackson. They're not going to listen to Al Sharpton. They're not even going to listen to Obama. You want to know why?
Why?
Because they're not in the trenches of knowing what's happening to these black people, because they're not out there right now. They're in their homes, $1 million homes, chilling.
So you think there's a disconnect, Cornelius? What you're saying is that there's a disconnect between the current young crop of black African Americans in the USA and their elders, the ones you're describing, the T.D. Jakeses, the Al Sharptons.
Well, what happened is, people, the leaders. Now, I don't know this for sure, but this is my speculation. Black leaders have taken money and paychecks to say what people want to say, and they had a disconnect because they're not still living in the community now. They take their money that they earn from white people, and they go move out of the community. So how's that happen? The black community. So when you have these young people out here, they have no hope. And the current justice system is a white people problem. It's not a black people problem. And I'm going to give you an example, because the white people are the majority of the business leaders here in America. So they don't ask for convictions of racist white cops. So when you don't ask for convictions, I ain't talking about arrests, because the arrests do happen, but we got to go from arrest to a conviction. When you don't have that, and these young Braves and Kings and Queens see that, they're going to get upset. Let me ask you a question. Do y'all remember what happened to Rodney King? Are y'all old enough to remember that?
Yeah, we just had that conversation this morning. We just, lent a little bit to that, Cornelius, and said that, 30 years ago, this was the conversation with Rodney King. And here we are 30 years later, still having the same conversation, and nothing seems to have changed.
Right. Because, you know what, in America, these are the leaders in every city in America, my African brothers and sisters. You have a mayor of every city. You have a chief of police in every city. And you have the prosecutor of every city. Those are the three leaders of every city. So, in Minneapolis, Philando, this black king, he was gunned down by a white racist cop. and got found not guilty 3 years ago in Minneapolis, right? 3 years later, you have Floyd being killed in the same city by a white racist cop. So the city of Minneapolis let America down. They let the citizens of Minneapolis down because the mayor, the chief of police, and the prosecutor took 72 hours to arrest this man. And they watched the city, the great city of Minneapolis, burn down. So when you sit back and watch, and y'all seen the video, so you got 4 cops that they protecting. Young people see that. Young people are not dumb. They're not naive anymore. They know, because you got YouTube, you got Instagram, you got Facebook. They're not naive. You know what I'm saying? So how can you trick them? So when I say the older people can't take cuts with the white people anymore, you got to get a black leader. Are y'all familiar with David Banner and Dr. Boyce Watkins and the Dr. Claude Anderson and all them? Have y'all seen Hidden Colors?
Yes.
Okay, those leaders. That's who the white America don't want to talk to.
Why?
But that's who they
Can I ask you why? Are we talking about they don't want to have the conversation because it will be uncomfortable, or they don't want to come face to face with the realities that be?
Both. You got both. They don't want to, because white America still don't teach slavery in the classroom. So, we all know what slavery was in New Zealand, Portugal, Spain, the islands. It was even in Mexico.
Yeah.
Because in Mexico you have statues of blacks in Mexico. So when you don't have the history in American schools, they try to hide stuff. So, but the young people, we're not the young kings and queens. They're not naive, so they don't have no hope. And see, white America, black America, which is the wealthy blacks and the wealthy, they live for tomorrow.
So when I hear you, Cornelia, speak,
they have plans.
I'm hearing you say that the current crop of young black Americans are feeling like they're being let down by the older black Americans.
Yeah.
I'm sure if we stepped back into into 30 years ago, the current older black Americans were young then, and they must have been feeling disenfranchised and feeling uncomfortable with the older black Americans then. So it seems to be a bigger problem here about the system, and the system not being able to react to the realities of what's happening in the States. If the Rodney King riots 30 years ago did not yield much, that we are seeing now, we have the George Floyd riots in 2020. It basically just shows that there's, and you've just given us an example. In Minneapolis, 3 years ago, there was a shooting to death of a black person, and the police officer did not get a conviction through the system.
Right.
And now we are even talking about George Floyd. It took so long before the police officer was even arrested. So it's a system issue, not really about the generations of the black leaders.
When I say the black leaders are not asking for conviction. They're not asking for change of the American justice system.
All right, so let's be clear. When you talk about black leaders here, Cornelius, are we talking about, for example, we've seen very clearly out of Minneapolis, we've seen the vice chair, this older lady who spoke about, asking them not to riot. We've seen the mayor of Atlanta come out and say, please don't riot. We've seen the chief of police in the city of Minneapolis in Minnesota saying, please don't come out and riot. Are you saying that these voices that are lending, these individuals who are lending their voices to this are letting down their people? Had they said come out and I'm
not saying yes. I'm not saying they're letting their community down. I'm saying the black community is not listening to them. They are weak.
Okay.
Their voice is numb, is void. So when you can talk. You ever had someone that you were talking to, and it was going through one ear and it was going out the other, because you ain't trying to hear what they're trying to say right now, right?
Yeah.
You right? Okay, that's what the black community is doing. We ain't trying to hear that.
So what are they trying to hear right now? Okay, let's take it down to the ground now. Let's say, honestly speaking, because it shouldn't be that this conversation is being had 30 years later. Let's look at it from the point of view where the rest of us sit on the globe, right? And we're looking at the United States, and we are saying global leader, tick, one of the largest helping hands in terms of aid to many countries in the Southern Hemisphere, tick. In terms of an economic power, they've got it, tick. But then we see all these things, and it seems that the internal workings of the United States is shambolic at best. At best, because of the things that we see going on. What needs to happen to change that?
Well, the justice system, everyone, not just blacks, we have to get conviction. We ain't asking for the head on the platter. Blacks ain't asking for that. We're not asking for nobody head on the platter. We just asking for justice. We're asking for arrest and conviction, because we see the same stuff happen over and over again. Now I'm gonna ask y'all the question. Do you think Minneapolis should have had a plan of action of how they're going to deal with an officer killing an unarmed black man 3 years ago? Do you think they should have had a plan? Hey, if something happened, what are we going to do?
Yep, they should.
They don't have a plan of action for. They don't have a plan of action for us. But they don't have They don't know how to police themselves. The plan of action got to be swift now, because you got Facebook, you got Instagram, you got stuff. It shares so fast, man. And then another person that's really responsible is when Donald Trump, our president, tweeted something and it inflamed.
Yeah.
Once he tweeted that, because Twitter has an algorithm when it's right now. It's right now. So everybody see it, and the retweets and the shares and the likes. When we don't get convictions, that's letting everybody down. They're not just letting black people down. They're letting white American business people, they're letting the Spanish business people down, the Spanish community, Chinese, the Arabs, even y'all. They're letting our African kings and queens down, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans. Everybody share this country.
Do you see a difference, Cornelius, between what you're saying now and what was being said even by Martin Luther King in the 60s and 70s? Do you see any difference between what you're saying now and what the other leaders, the Al Sharptons, were saying earlier in their years, the Jesse Jacksons were saying? Is there any difference between the conversation being had now by the younger black Americans?
Right now, Martin Luther King them did a great job, because that's what they had to go off of. But we in the information era of the world. This era is about information. So we got the information now, so you can't hide stuff from us. You see what I'm saying? So you can't hide stuff from back then. They was able to hide information from black people, from Martin Luther King, from Malcolm X, and all that. They was able to hide it. Even land. Don't y'all know the majority of land in America was given to white people?
Sure.
Y'all probably don't know that.
It's in terms of information being out there, it's clear that that's what was done. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask then, with this information being out in the open, I mean, if we want to now compare the two, 30 years ago with Rodney King, 2020 with the George Floyd, more information at the click of a finger, you can get this information. Do you think now that with this we're going to see a change in the expending of justice now? Do you think that the conviction is going to be gotten?
You know what? In my heart right now, in my soul, I think we are going to get convictions. I think because I was on the phone with the brother Tim, and he was asking me some questions about what should he tell his congregation, the white. And I said, look here, you got to get early in our interview, you heard me say you got to get 3 people in the room: the mayor, the chief of police, and the prosecutor. Those are the 3 people that control every city.
Yep.
We ain't talking about economics. We ain't talking about billionaires, millionaires, or anything else. We talking about law, structure. You know what I'm saying? So when they don't say this person is wrong and then convict them, you got a problem.
True.
And now you're going to see these young braves out here do it again.
Right.
You let another black person die like Floyd again, we ain't scared. They ain't scared, man. They ain't scared. these young braves like some young Indians. Like when them young Indians weren't scared to fight the army, they went to war because they'd rather die.
They're ready for anything.
Than they ready for anything. They're ready, man. There's some videos, man. These young kings and queens, and all I call them young kings and queens because they lost hope.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I still believe in our community. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just
At this point,
and
Cornelius,
they living for right now.
we are speaking with Cornelius West, who's in Tampa, Florida. He's a social commentator. And at this point, let's also bring in somebody who's also in the USA, from Chicago, Illinois, is an author and community leader, TJ Addington. Good morning, TJ.
Good morning.
TJ, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. Welcome to the Situation Room right here in Nairobi, Kenya. TJ, you've been hearing what Cornelius is saying, talking about why the younger people are feeling like they've been let down by the system, by the fellow leadership of Black Americans. They're feeling, they ought to get results now, and those results, they're hoping that those results will last a generation at least and change the system. Do you see any kind of change of system from the current riots after the George Floyd killing?
I believe there will be changes. This is obviously a very complicated matter. I've worked and traveled in some 60 countries, and everywhere you go in our world, there is racism, and there's injustice, and there's oppression. My own view is that and I can only speak from a white perspective, while Cornelius speaks from his own black experience. My own view is that the white majority in the United States do not understand the realities of the issues that black men and women face. And that comes because there's a lack of relationship between them, among other things. As Cornelius says, there are structural issues, there are political issues. I work a lot in the faith community, and I believe it's time for the church to wake up, to listen, to speak up, and to act, and to do those things in concert with their fellow citizens of color.
TJ, is it time for racism to be declared a state of emergency in the United States?
That's a political question, and so many things become political in our environment today in the U.S. I would say that it is an emergency for our nation. It has been for a long time, but it is becoming more inflamed, and unless we are willing to acknowledge and face up to that fact and act on it, we will face, as Cornelius said, ever-increasing conflict.
The protests that are
Can I
going...
interject on that question?
Go ahead.
Can you ask that question again for me, please?
No, I was saying that I was asking that is it time for, and which TJ has answered, is it time for racism to be declared as a state of emergency in the United States?
Yes. That was the question. Yes. And one thing that I want to clear with my African people to paint this picture is this is not white against black. This is not about race right now. People want to say it's about race. It's not. This is about injustices. And so my thing right now is we can talk about the looting and all that all day long, but if you don't talk about the injustices of black people being dead by the hands of white racist cops, the conversation is void. Y'all shouldn't have no conversations. Don't even entertain any conversation about looting and properties and anything else if you're not going to fix this problem. People want to be positive right now, right? You want to be positive. Everybody want to be positive. You can't be positive if you can't fix this negative. You can't put the positive before the negative. And now people want to put the trash up on the rug and cover it up or put a Band-Aid on it. No, you can't put no Band-Aid on it now. You know what I'm saying? So this is not black against white, but the media and all that, we're painted like that. We love cops. We love our black. We love white. I got some amazing white friends. I mean, amazing. So this is not an indictment on the whole race. This is about just time after time after time after time after time again. 400 years of it.
Hasn't this injustice, however, been flamed or been perpetrated even more because of the fact that there is discrimination between both races?
Thanks for that question. The one thing about it is you have cops here that was bullied when they was in high school and stuff, and they become cops, so they get this badge, and they get the right to wear a gun. So it gives them ego and power and stuff like that. When you look at that cop face when he was on his neck, you see how proud he was? He was proud to be on that black man's neck. That's evil. That is evil. And so when people think that it's okay to watch videos like that, it's not okay to watch that.
But what is it that would make him behave like that? What is it that would make him behave like that without feeling like there's going to be any kind of repercussion to his actions?
Because there is no ramification of killing a black man or black sister or black kid.
So it comes to the race issues.
It is a race issue when it comes to cops, a white cop. So it makes it a race issue. But when we see it on video, y'all seen the same video that I've seen, right?
Yes, the same one.
You seen exactly. So if you're a juror, like I mean, when you say he's a murderer,
Yep.
Yes or no? Like, yes. Okay.
If I was a juror, I would say he's a murderer.
But right. So, but when they get the evidence and they use all this, one word that always get used in police dealings with killings is just cause. He had just cause to kill him. They use that term a lot.
Cause to kill.
They use that term a lot, and then they try to use autopsy. Autopsy came back about Floyd that he died of heart trouble, right? Now they just came out and said it was asphyxiation because you know what? If you come out with this lie, we're gonna stay mad. You see how they try to do it? So that's the injustice part. So it's not about white versus black. It's white versus black when it comes to death and injustices.
Right.
But as far as racism, yes, it does exist. But this is not a racism problem right now. This is an injustice.
It's an injustice issue.
We want convictions. We don't want to rest.
I want to head back. I want to ask TJ again. TJ, when you started the conversation, you said what you see here is a situation where the white community has, over the years, never understood the issues that really affect the black community, and this is a generational issue.
Right.
Why is it that there would be such a disconnect with people who are in the same country? I mean, the issue of racial injustice has been told as a story every year in America. Why is it that would get to a point in 2020 where the white community would be at a position where they don't really understand what goes on or what issues that affect the black community?
You know, I suspect that it has to do with the changes that took place during Martin Luther King's time, where the obvious discrimination was put to rest. The things that you would see, like separate bathrooms and separate drinking fountains, and where you sit on a bus, and so those obvious pieces are not obvious anymore. I mean, they're gone. But what isn't obvious are the attitudes of injustice, the injustice that takes place in our court systems, because the experience of the white population is very different in some of these areas than the experience of our brothers and sisters of color. And so unless you listen carefully to the experiences of your black friends, you just don't even understand that this happens. And so the white community can often speak of law and order. The black community is asking for justice, and the reason I put faith in some faith in the faith community is that God had a lot to say about these kinds of things. I just wrote a piece where I quote Isaiah. Is this not the kind of fasting I have chosen to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke, to share your food with the hungry and provide the poor wanderer with shelter? And it goes on. And if we truly understood those places in society where there is injustice, oppression, and real physical needs, and took those seriously, the conversation would start to change.
TJ, do you see this going across? Because, we want to talk about it from a community level, but if that is happening where we don't have an understanding, where, white folks don't have an understanding of what is going on, then I hear you saying that this goes as far as high as, the highest office in the land, from the police inspectors to prosecutors that Cornelius has mentioned, and then to those in the assembly, those legislators, to the office of the president. Do they not have an understanding of what is really going on? Because from where I sit, then if you do have this understanding, it would then help in the expansion of justice. And so are we saying that justice is not being served because there's not an understanding of the injustices that are being meted out on the people, on the black community?
I think there's not an understanding of the reality, which is why if you talk to black legislators and politicians, their view of the situation is very different than that of white politicians and legislators, with some exceptions, of course. So the issue can be in your face, or it can be very subtle. A lot of the injustices may be subtle, but they're felt very deeply by those that experience them. So every black person I've talked to in the United States has been pulled over when they're driving. I've never been pulled over except when I was speeding. I have friends that don't feel safe going jogging because people look at them and make them feel unsafe. I have a black friend who was in a grocery store just recently. Everybody's wearing masks, of course, and a white gentleman lifts up his shirt looking at this black gentleman and reveals his gun. He carries a gun. I mean, how can that not deeply impact the black community? And it's just plain sinfully wrong.
So it clearly shows, TJ, that the white community as well, there are those in the white community who know exactly what they are doing. Like that gentleman who's basically just showing a gun to the black person in the store, or the white people who see a black person in their community and they start turning the other way or start raising alarm that there's a black person in our community. They know exactly what is happening. They know their perception of the black people. So we cannot really say that they don't understand what happens, they don't understand the injustices when they also participate in perpetrating the same injustice.
Right.
Well, that's true.
Can I interject on that right there?
Go ahead, Cornelia.
Excuse me. When that white guy did that right there,
Yep.
he know that if he do that, he's not going to get as much time as a black person. So when he do that, he know if he get arrested, he is going to be judged as when white people carry guns legally, they look as they are operating in a Second Amendment right.
Yep.
When a black person owns a gun legally, he is a criminal.
Yep.
So, and there's a grossly injustice. I don't keep saying injustice because there's a grossly injustice with a white person getting jail time versus a black person getting jail time. And when a white person goes to jail or get pulled over and get tickets, they might get one.
Yep.
When a black person get it, they gonna get 5 tickets. When a white person can go to jail for selling crack cocaine, get probation, time served. A black person gonna do 5 years.
Right.
Because down out here in America, the prison is a business. They are private now. They're not owned by states.
Yeah.
But they make money off of cigarettes. They make money off of phone cards. They make money off of food. They make money off of traveling. Hotels.
So they need folks to be in prison, basically.
Yes. So that white guy that's in the store showing his gun, he's brave. He has no fear of going to jail for a long period of time.
Because he knows that the system will work for him, not against him.
It's working with him.
So
and
probably,
as a matter of fact, he probably got enough money to hire a lawyer, or his family got enough money to hire a lawyer and get off easy. A lot of times, these people give prosecutor, judges, and lawyers $10,000 or more, and here I'm gonna get you this right here.
Yep.
Because they in cahoots with these lawyers and judges
with the law enforcement system.
That's a problem too.
Is it possible, maybe, Cornelius,
so that's why they act like that?
From just that example that TJ has given us of the white person in the store, is it possible that maybe the white person, because he knows he's carrying a gun, he's exercising his Second Amendment rights and all, maybe he also doesn't know that if the black person went to through the system, he'd have a harsher treatment by the system? Could it be a link to what TJ was saying, that the white community does not really have empathize with what the black community goes through?
Yeah, and it's true, and it's not all of them, because some do understand. I have some friends that they can come up to me and ask all kind of questions. They care about me. I work with a lot of good white friends.
Yep.
I mean, really do. They really want to know what's going on. They make sure I get home safe. They make sure I understand, and they vocal about it. They're not sugarcoating around it. They're not pacifying me either. I'm not pacifying them. I'm very stern. And the one thing about the black community don't have right now, you name even, this is no disrespect, but the Pope don't got no power right now. He's the highest person in the Catholic community. He can't tell a black person nothing right now.
So what's going to happen?
So what's it going to take? What's it going to take then for anyone to listen? Because the situation, I mean, I don't think it's percolating now. I think it has boiled over. What's it going to take to get?
It's going to take.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
It's gonna take. I was talking to TJ before this phone call, and I told TJ to be patient with what's going on because he's gonna be frustrated because he wants a quick action plan. But I told him what to do to get those 3 people: prosecutor, chief of police, and the mayor in the same room. And they gotta have a plan to get it going, but it gotta be organic and it gotta be authentic. Because you can't trick these young braves. Because you saw what happened with the autopsy report. It said he had a heart attack.
Yep.
But it changed quick, right?
But Cornelius and TJ, I'm going to ask this question to the both of you as we come to the conclusion of this interview. Do you see the current agitation taking any sort of structure and form that will take us towards meaningful change and an end to the current agitation? Starting with you, Cornelius.
One thing, like I said, you can't fool the black community, and not just in America, and globally. We are smart. We are intelligent creatures on this earth that's seeking the same rights, the same that we ain't paying for. Like I said, we ain't asking for nobody head on a platter. You know what I'm saying? But they think it's wrong to convict a cop that killed people. Tamir Rice was 13 years old when he got gunned down. Trayvon Martin was a boy when he got gunned down.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like, as long as these injustices happen, you're gonna see this again. Those young braves and warriors,
so what's it gonna take to end the current agitation? We gotta get conviction.
Conviction.
The conviction.
Period.
Okay.
TJ, what do you think?
Of cops.
TJ?
I think it's. I agree that there has to be justice in the court system, but I think that both black and white leaders are recognizing that what is there is not sustainable. You cannot have cities burning down. You cannot have this kind of conflict. And so, as I spoke with some black leader friends yesterday, we would like to see a coalition of the willing. Not everybody's willing, but a coalition of the willing who will come together, identify the key areas where change must happen, and then bring people to the table in each of those areas, the courts included, to work together to bring systemic change and to fix some of the structural issues that fuel this kind of conflict.
Right. Well, I mean, we have to come to the end of this conversation, but we thank both of you for lending your voice to this. It's obviously something that needs to continue. The conversation continues, and we always say that if we stop talking about it, then minds can't be changed. And if we're looking for some of the answers that we've talked about here, then the conversation absolutely does have to continue. Cornelius West in Tampa, Florida, and TJ Addington in Chicago, Illinois, thank you so much for being part of the conversation this morning in the Situation Room. And we hope that we can keep it going. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you and have a great day. The conversation continues as well on our social media platforms, Spice FM KE on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. As we come to the top of the hour, let me remind you today's proverb, and it is from Tunisia. If your friend is honey, I've got to be very careful with this word. If your friend is honey, do not lick him thoroughly. If your friend is honey, do not lick him thoroughly. It's 8 a.m. Good morning.
All right, let's have a look at it now. And on Thika Road, it seems to have opened up, well, in this case, closed down because traffic is bumper to bumper heading down towards the Utali Drift and then out towards the Pangani Underpass, connecting with Kiambu Road, connecting with Muthaiga Corner. It's going to be quite packed this morning. All right, let's look at Mombasa Road, where we had an incident right around the SGR opposite of the Hilton Garden Inn. And there's a problem there because there was an accident and so traffic has backed up. All right. Other parts of the city, construction has resumed on Waiaki Way. It seems that everything is opening up here. And so that means that traffic has been affected as you're going towards the CBD. So it's a bit of a hold up here and there, but not too bad. We'll report other cases as we come along and look at what other towns within the country are looking like. But for now, it doesn't look too bad. You can let us know what you see. Spice FMKE, that's on Twitter. Let's see how we can keep it moving this Tuesday morning.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Lou Ogo, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room.
Outside the White House gates were dispersed with tear gas, flash grenades and rubber bullets. It was all apparently so Trump could visit a nearby church. So basically, they're just clearing the way because the president needs to get out of the White House. So rubber bullets, flash grenades, tear gas. The episode, which amounted to one of the most highly charged and discordant moments in recent presidential history, came as nationwide unrest escalates and as Trump comes under pressure to demonstrate a modicum of conciliation for a country torn along racial, ideological, and political lines. He did not offer that on Monday, choosing instead to retrench. He called violent protests domestic acts of terror, which law enforcement would dominate the streets to quell. If the city or state refuses to take the actions necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the U.S. military and quickly solve the problem for them. He's still seeing it as that. This is acts of domestic terrorism. Why are they out on the streets?
Right.
What the hell is wrong with them? State governors, take charge. If
Not
you can't take
dealing
charge,
with the
we're going to
issue.
come and sort it out.
Yeah, not dealing with the issue. And don't we see
Dealing
that?
with the issue.
Right. And don't
And
we
the
see
issue
that
to
around
him
the world?
is that people are looting.
Which is not the issue.
That's the
a
issue to
symptom.
him.
It's a symptom of the problem. It's the headache you get. It's the fever you get that is a signal to the disease. And unfortunately, the disease in very many cases is not dealt with. We see that here domestically, we see it across the continent, and clearly we see it around the world where people are poking at the headache, poking at the sniffle without looking at what the real cause of the problem is.
And
I
he's
think
trying
it's
to say,
absolutely necessary.
I'm an ally of peaceful protesters. I'm an ally. The guys at the White House were peaceful protesters. But because he needed to get out, flash grenades,
Get rid of them.
tear gas, and all that, get rid of them. And yet he says he's an ally. This is very unfortunate conversation that's happening. Right now, COVID-19 has basically just been pushed to the back burner in the States. People are out there. People are out in the streets. They're observing these measures. Let's see what happens. Switch gears a little bit. Come back to Africa.
Right. So coming back to the continent, there are many things that are going on in the world as we see it. And safe to say that colonization never really ended on the continent. Let's take a look then in West Africa specifically, whereby we saw the domination of France still taking place very heavily until about 3 weeks ago, when France finally ratified the end to domination of certain West African states by virtue of the fact that they would take, and it was not just lightly given, take, and I'm going to say take, where they would take a large percentage of their foreign reserves to be stored away in France. All right? By virtue of the fact that, yes, you gained your independence, quote unquote, it was kind of quasi-independence. You gained your independence, but look, the money that you make on a yearly, give it to us.
So we're talking about 8 countries.
We'll hold it for you. We're talking about 8 countries. And these countries specifically that were affected by this were Cameroon, the Central African Republic, Chad, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Republic of Congo, Benin, Togo, Guinea-Bissau. Okay, so let me start that again. Benin, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Niger, Senegal, and Togo. All right? And they were known as the West African Monetary Union. All of these countries using the CFA. It comes from the French words for African Financial Community, which is what the CFA was. And this is the currency that each and every one of them would use. And it was launched in 1945 as the franc of the French colonies of Africa, CFA. So this is the money that they trade. This is the currency that these countries would trade in. There's been a lot of push and pull. We had the former Minister of the Diaspora for the African Union, Ariakana Kwao, talk about the fact that this should not be the case. It should not be the case that autonomous nations with sovereignty should not have to hand over their foreign reserves and then be left in abject poverty as they try to succeed and enrich France, who keeps a percentage of this. So there's been a lot of agitation to have this removed. It was interesting because as of 3 weeks ago, the much-awaited ratifying to the end of the CFA franc was adopted by the French Council of Ministers. And it was during an official visit to Côte d'Ivoire by President French Macron and French West African leaders, and they announced that a historic reform of monetary cooperation was going to lead to the end of the CFA franc. It needed to happen, and it finally has been ratified, and so now we're waiting to see how the transition year is going to occur. So
these 8 countries that now have gained this so-called second liberation or independence, now they're
the real independence.
50% of their foreign reserves are not going to be sitting in some bank in Paris,
Yes.
right? So now they can run their own currency. But they've been having one uniform currency, the eight countries,
Yes,
now the CFA franc.
Yes.
Are they now going to have a same uniform? Are they still going to call their currency the CFA franc? Are they going to come up with their own independent currencies like the Beninois deciding that ours is going to be called something different?
What they're looking at, because they're still a part of the economic community of West African states, is what they're looking to adopt now essentially would be the ECO. And so the ECO would be the currency that they would use. If you want to look at transitionary terms, it would be much easier for these 8 to now move to one. I mean, they were trading with one anyway.
Yeah.
So now if it was one within which they could retain and maintain their autonomy, it would then be easier for them to use still this one currency.
They can help to launch the ECO.
Exactly.
The ECO is what ECOWAS wants to have, a
ECOWAS
common
has been
currency.
having this conversation for 3 decades.
For a common currency.
Yes, for a common currency.
Never been able to actually actualize it.
So?
And now 8 countries, actually, they have already started announcing that they'd like to move into the ECO. And still now the leaders of ECOWAS are saying, wait, we're not ready. Chill.
So what better opportunity than this? All right. So I think, this presents a perfect opportunity for them to be able to do that. So they'll like you said, they'll no longer have to deposit the foreign exchange reserves with the Bank of France, and France will have to withdraw its presence from the governance bodies of these countries, because the presence of France has been quite heavy in these countries. Look, you go to some of these countries, speaking specifically Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, Benin, you would think it was a mini France, right? In the way in which they operated, in the way in which the systems of government operated, even in Cameroon. So it's seeing a change, and hopefully, it is really the hope that the 8 presidents of these countries, some of them who are coming to the end of some of their terms now, will really look into these countries being independent and move towards economic development.
There's a publication called the Africa Report, and the Africa Report has reported extensively on this whole conversation about the CFA franc, the 8 West African countries, and their push to try and get themselves liberated, so to speak, from the French, and having their CFA franc, sort of getting detached completely from the control of Paris. And what's now going to happen with that is also a very important and interesting story, because so now you have these 8 countries Do we know what they want to do? They have signaled that they'd like to now go and join the ECO immediately. The ECO is not ready. There's no proper structure for setting up the ECO. So what are they going to do? Those that have been pushing and proponents of the status quo have been saying, like, look, just because the CFA franc, first of all, has some connection with Paris, right? We have stability in terms of the exchange rate. It's fixed to the euro. So we know our exchange. There's that financial stability in our economies. Also, because we have these other sort of governance structures, it helps to keep checks and balances. And the 8 of us have the same currency. It helps us to also check each other. So we have to ensure that there's stability of the CFA franc, as opposed to the other countries where one country's currency could keep fluctuating, as opposed to the neighbor's currency, or not relate to the neighbor's currency. What's going to happen now that we have this? Let's bring in somebody who understands these matters a bit better than us. This is Patrick Stevenson. He is an economic consultant and writes for the African Report. Good morning, Patrick.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for having me.
Good morning, Patrick.
Hi, good morning, Andrew. How are you?
Very well, thank you. If we start this conversation, I mean, it's got a lot of historical value when it comes to understanding what was really going on. But I mean, if we can just start rudimentarily now, where are we? What's going on? Because if we want to look at Africa as a whole and look at how it has been segmented over time, what does this mean now for the financial and economic independence of specifically these 8 countries?
Well, so it's interesting you take the narrative, back to what the history really has been. I mean, not only for these 8 countries we have within the sub-region, but at least the continent as a whole. At that famous Berlin conference on the continent was balkanized. We never thought there was ever going to be a day where we've seen some of the developments we're seeing now. So a part of me, will say yes. At least it's better than nothing. But if you look at the way the global economy is organized today, this is just another mechanism in my view, and I know a lot of people probably would disagree with this, but it's just another way that metropolitan France is still finding, to control the economies of these 8 West African countries. And what is more, in my opinion, which is more damaging, is the possible impact that is likely going to have, not on those 8 economies, not on those 8 French economies, because as you're aware, there's a lot of conversation about, creating a common market for not only West Africa, but at least the African continent as a whole, which has implications for, things like what currencies we are going to have for conducting business, etc. And so the possible setback will not be for only these countries. And it looks like a mirage. So, on one hand, we're told, these countries no longer have to deposit, some parts of their foreign reserves. For the want of a better word, for those who may not be in this discipline, saying that whatever money that country has, these 8 countries, they don't have to go and deposit these monies, in metropolitan France anymore. It creates a perception that, well, then you get to keep all of the money that you have, and it makes your economy sound. That's not true. It's not necessarily the case. And it's not the case because of a number of factors. So if you permit me, I explain what these factors are.
Please do. Yeah.
There's what we call the conduct of monetary policy that is supposed to guide the behavior of government, how they spend money, and how they direct the economy. It happens in every country. So every country has got a central bank that works with the government to direct monetary policy, which influences the government's own fiscal policy and what they do. Now, ordinarily, the country that controls its own currency dictates its monetary policy. So for years now, the Francophone countries that were using the CFA franc, which is based on that colonial tax system, could not control their own monetary policy. Okay? And that was stemmed out of the fact that a greater percentage of their monetary policy reserves or their foreign currency reserve had to be kept in France. What you have now is not to say everything is all of a sudden going to be kept, in these 8 countries. That's the first thing that we got to recognize. Secondly, a part of that as well is the suggestion that they are going to anchor this to the euro. Well, none of these countries print the euro.
Yep.
None of them.
None.
So effectively, the monetary policies of these countries is going to be dependent on developments you have in Europe and what happens to the euro.
Yeah.
So the sovereignty that you typically look for in a country like maybe Nigeria that controls its own naira and so has to deal with maybe FX exchanges with dollar and other currencies. They don't have that luxury for these 8 countries. What is worse, they may not be able to dictate their independent monetary policies. They are going to have to create a monetary union, like you may have for, like in the case of West Africa, for example, we have these West African Development Bank. They may need a monetary institution, and already within ECOWAS, we have the West African Monetary Institute that is supposed to help set up a framework by which we conduct monetary policy within the region. We just haven't been able to actualize that properly. And so if we consider the fact that there is a possibility that monetary policies for these countries will not be dictated by them, then I ask, who really is determining the behavior of the governments of these countries instructing their economies?
Right.
If we don't get to the bottom of that, it's very problematic. And that's why I say this looks like it's fine, but it's a mirage. Why
So you still think that Paris will have a control over this, Patrick?
Well, it's not what I think. It is what their decisions suggest. That they effectively are going to conduct monetary policy in this way. That is going to determine what the governments are going to do. Like, we've not even gotten into what the geopolitical structures around, the whole system that they are trying to put across looks like. Because again, we understand some power movements within the West Africa and the Waimu region that led to this happening. People not being comfortable about the position of Nigeria, for example, in ECOWAS, France seeing that they're gradually losing political ground, and so this is another way by which they could still get to control the system. And so we've not gotten into those debates, right? If we want to look at it purely on economic basis, and the argument that France somewhat is doing something good, I'm saying it's not. If you want to get out, just get out. That's it.
So
if you want to get out, get out.
Are these 8 countries positioned? I mean, you talked about, economic institutions that are necessary for some kind of policy. Are these 8 countries, as they are, specifically positioned to be able to get out and stand alone? That's one side of the question. And then the part B of that question, Patrick, would be then that are they applauding this move as nations? Are they applauding this move and saying, finally, we are free? Against the backdrop of what you've just said, that it's a mirage and it's not really happening in terms of freedom.
Well, so those are very interesting and very important questions that you put across. First of all, are the countries solid enough? I mean, they are not the smallest of countries in the world.
No.
That's the point. That's a fact that I've got to. They may be small, they may be poor by some benchmarks, but they are not the smallest countries in the world. And for me, every country has got what it takes to organize its own economic affairs based on the size of its economy and if it decides to make those decisions. So if you take Benin, for example, yes, Benin may not look too big within the West African sub-region. Benin may not go and rub shoulders with Nigeria, for example. I mean, Nigeria closing its borders, some months ago because of the infiltration of arms, almost decimated some parts of the Benin economy.
Right.
So those economies may be small, but my point is that they have what it takes to survive because you have much smaller and much more complex economies elsewhere on the globe that haven't died simply because they're making decisions alone. That's one. Two, the countries live in a sub-region where they do business and trade. Right? So if you cut off the dependence on France and the export of minerals and export of resources and transfer of resources into metropolitan France, European market, there's an opportunity here for the Beninois to do business with their brothers in Nigeria.
Right.
They cross the border anyway.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity here for the Togolese to cross the border and do business with their brothers in Ghana. If you go to Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, the same narrative exists. And so the point is that to the extent that we're saying we need to start looking inwards as Africans to start trading with ourselves, I believe there's an opportunity for these countries to stand on their own. That is the first point. Secondly, they have what it takes to conduct their independent monetary policy that determines what is going to happen in that part of the West African market.
Right.
What is interesting, though, is that all of these conversations are happening at a time where ECOWAS itself is thinking of a common currency. The African continent itself is thinking about a common trading area. So the prospects for standing alone and getting to do things on their own, in my opinion, really looks bright. The only challenge is that there is a mirage. It looks like we have given you freedom, we haven't given you. Which takes me to your second question. Is this necessarily a decision that the people of these countries are supporting? Well, I think there are two ways of examining that. One is to look at what the decision, what the feelings or the aspirations of the political class really looks like, and the connection or disconnection between the political class and their citizens. We know for years and decades that the citizens of these countries that you have outlined, these West African countries, have been displeased. They have not been happy with the way the economies have been managed and with the level of influence that France has had in these economies. We know that for a fact. And France, geopolitically, has continued to establish governments, they've supported governments that are dirigists, that have suppressed people over time. So, to some extent, there will be people who will think that this may be a step in the right direction. But when they look behind the cloak, when they lift the cloak and see that this is really not all good news, well, people are going to be worried.
Right.
However, the political class are playing to the gallery of France, so some of them can still stay in office. And we know Alassane Ouattara, for example, in Côte d'Ivoire won.
Yes.
Right? And so the point is that some members of the political class, based on geopolitics and the pursuit of their own political interests, will be fine with the decisions that have been made. But I don't think the ordinary person walking the streets of Abidjan or the streets of Yamoussoukro or walking the streets of Togo and Benin really believe that this is something that is happening that is progressive enough and it's in the pursuit of their interest. If they get to understand what the details really looks like.
Right. We've had this conversation, even amongst countries who may not really suffer from domination, as it were, by an external force. Right, Patrick? However, there are many issues that still, you started off by saying that not just these 8 West African countries, but countries across the continent who may be looking for some kind of independence. There have been talks. Currently we're looking at the whole issue of acquisition of the African Development Bank and things like this, whereby people have been seeking for African solutions to African problems. And I hear you saying that these 8 and even others, apart from, what is happening with France, that this could be the solution that we're looking for as economically independent nations. The answers then are within. And for somebody who studied the economies of African countries, do you feel that this is what needs to happen at this time?
Well, so there's a way of looking at it. In fact, there's a lot of extensive studies that have examined the preparedness of African countries to managing and running their affairs. And anytime we've tried to draw parallels with colonialism and how, some of these countries have been oppressed, people are quick to point to a country like, Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa, for example, right? And what you see there tells you that the repression that the continent of Africa and the various countries we have in there are confronted with is not a matter of black or white. It's not a matter of somebody crossing the Atlantic Ocean and suppressing and extorting resources from you. It's a matter of destroying institutions, political institutions and economic institutions that help people self-sustain, generate wealth and do business. So what we've had in Africa in the last 400 years, these political institutions and economic institutions by which people organize themselves were destroyed by white people that came and suppressed you. What we did in the 50s to the 60s was to replace the white tyranny, with black tyranny.
Right.
So we kicked the white man away, replaced them with tyrannical systems that are still exploitative politically and economically. So it is okay for an African government, an African political leader, to all of a sudden ransack a central bank, stash the money up in Europe somewhere. And that will not change the narrative. So are we at a point where Africans should be excited? Maybe yes, for feeling for the want of for feeling good to say that it is not the white man that is killing me, it's the black man.
It's one of our own.
And for the want of a better word, that is silly.
It's silly
because again, the Greeks and I borrow the words of Greek philosophers here, where they argue that you cannot build any prosperous society when majority of the people are idiots. Idiots being people who typically are not bothered about what happens
about what's
them.
going on.
Okay?
Yeah.
Or people who are people who are tribalists, who think that it's just about them and what matters. So that if there's a black man today walking the streets of Togo, walking the streets of Benin and feeling that, well, it is not the white man that is extorting me, it is my own people, it's fine. Well, there's everything wrong with that.
Right.
There's everything wrong with that. And, the good old professor, Patrick Otieno Lumumba, I don't know if you're familiar with his work.
Yeah.
I mean, he has consistently argued, he's an anti-corruption crusader, who tours the continent these days talking a lot about corruption. He argues that in Kenya, for example, he finds it strange when people say, oh, this thief is our thief.
Yeah.
It's okay, we know he steals from us, but we like him. That does not create a narrative where the African can move forward. So to answer your question more specifically, it is not okay to feel good that it is not a white man that is oppressing you economically or politically. I think that Africans have got to start asking questions about the extractive political and economic institutions that have governed them for so long, to get to a point where if the money, for example, from France is being returned, or like we have seen in the case of Nigeria, where Abacha's loot has been returned, if it's being returned, it's being returned to who?
Exactly.
Who benefits from the largesse? So that if you don't break down the extractive political institutions and build inclusive ones, if you don't destroy the extractive economic institutions and build inclusive ones, if you don't create systems that encourage young people that we have on our continent today to be very entrepreneurial and aspirational enough, then it makes no difference to say, you have the French are now giving you some level of sovereignty because people are going to extort you. We've seen examples of this in South Africa, for example, where apartheid is gone, but you still have extractive political institutions that are usurping people's lands and people don't have an opportunity to get economic freedom.
Right.
We saw that in Zimbabwe as well. We saw that in Zambia. So all across the continent, you have this checkered history that shows that replacing the color of the human being or whoever is oppressing you necessarily does not solve the problem. It is the ability of that society to break down the extractive political and economic institutions.
As I hear you speak, Patrick, it sounds to me that you're very much convinced that the African people have not reached that point where they are able to discern and tell that they are still living under oppression.
Well, that's an interesting way of putting it. I wouldn't want to say they haven't gotten to that level of consciousness. I think that if we borrow once again, the thinking of the Greeks when they argue that you don't want to build any society by looking at idiots or giving consideration to people who are tribalists. You want to really look at citizens who are bothered about things that happen to them, what happens to their neighbor, what happens to society as a whole. I think that consciousness is not there yet. Because of the extractive political institutions we've had, people don't believe, or people generally don't feel that they are part of a system and that system needs to be fixed.
Right.
Okay. But if I should take a cue from what happened about a decade ago across the northern part of the continent and some of the countries you have, towards the southern part, it gives me hope that it's possible that when people are displeased by the extractive political institutions, they can overthrow them. And I'm not saying people should go and pick up a gun and go shoot anybody. I'm saying that if the system by which you are governed politically and economically does not make sense, you have every right to find the right systems and mechanisms to overthrow them. And we've seen examples of that in Tunisia, we've seen examples of that in Egypt, we've seen examples of that in Zimbabwe, for example. It's a possibility. So I won't say the ordinary African or the young African today does not recognize it. They do. The question is, how do you then leverage the resources that you have? How do you leverage your own strength to overthrow these systems? And sometimes it's a matter of bread and butter. It's hard to navigate these constraints, these political constraints. So we will get there eventually. But I think that having a conversation like this, for example, for starters, is good. and getting young people to understand that there has to be a change in the narrative.
But then I still want to dwell on that, Patrick. We still don't have that much consciousness within the continent to get us to understand that, well, we need to still change the system. If we look at the generations since the 50s to now, and the generations in the 50s that were now pushing and agitating for freedom and independence from the white man, why is it that we'd assume that those other generations since then haven't gotten to a point where they feel, well, we still are not living the ideals of what our forefathers were fighting for?
Well, so the answer to that question is two level. One, I think there's been a thinking across the continent of Africa that somehow the future of the continent has got to be orchestrated by 70-year-old men. I don't have anything against people who are 50, 60, and 70, but I'm sorry that time is over.
Right.
I don't think 60 and 70-year-olds orchestrated the independence of Africa. Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Emery Lumumba, Nelson Mandela Mandela, and the likes, who touched and saw what Africa needed to do or what Africa needed to look like. When 70-year-olds, when they were doing that, we're talking about people who were 27, 30, 33, 35-year-olds. There were 70-year-olds in their time who wanted to do things slow. They told them, no, it is now and it must happen now. What we saw after their time was the thinking that somehow they had to be the same people that orchestrated the future of Africa. And I think that's where the problem is. So I wouldn't want to say that the young African man today does not see. I think they see. But the systems are so extractive such that there's not even enough room. I mean, look at some of the countries you have on the continent where even political participation at a certain level has got to be about 40 or 50 years old. It doesn't make any sense. Okay? Yet, the very energetic part of that economy is usually people who are 30, 25, 27, 30-year-olds. I wonder if there's any 70-year-old on the African continent today who has a business and will employ another 70-year-old man to run that business for him.
Right. Definitely. I mean, you're going to look younger.
Right? Paul Biya won't do that. Muhammadu Buhari in Nigeria won't do that. None of them. What it tells you is that the engine and the energy for doing things that matter in the economy is all sitting within the age bracket that matters. However, for some strange reason, when we look at making the decisions that actually direct what the future looks like, somehow it has to be based on the experience of 70-year-old men. I'm sorry. And so to respond more specifically to the question, I'm saying that the young men on the African continent today, when you think of it in terms of leadership, what must happen on the economy, in terms of their consciousness and understanding what the world looks like, the world is more connected today than it was 50, 60 years ago. They don't need shit to go to Europe and find out that things are good. They don't need to fly out to go and find out that you can build a bridge that actually works and generates power. They don't need to do that.
No.
So people are a lot more enlightened and a lot more connected now. The only challenge is with the 70-year-olds relinquishing power and allowing young people to do things in a way that connects and works better. And that has been based off of the thinking that somehow you have to work in the private sector, grow, become 70-year-olds, get into the public sector, where the decision making, in my opinion, is more complex. It's more complex, more stressful. We put them there.
Right.
I think if we start changing that, we stand a better chance of usurping the energies that we need from young people to do things that matter on the African continent.
Okay, if we take a last question for you, Patrick, and that's like, I mean, hearing all that you've said and then just looking at the recent developments that are happening, even, with what was our subject matter, and obviously this can pass on to the entire continent. Do we have enough then in terms of information, in terms of drive, in terms of awareness of what needs to happen to make these changes on the continent, and to be able to look beyond, this would allow, adopt your word, this mirage that we may see of something that is representing something else? Do we have the wherewithal to look beyond that and actually then make these decisions that are necessary to move forward, whether it's economic development, whether it's authentic leadership and governance, whether it's proper policy making, whatever it is across country? Do we have enough?
Well, I don't think there's ever a time where there's been any economic agents, whether an individual, business, or government, has got all the resources they need or had all the information they need to make decisions. I think the most important thing is that you recognize where you are and start from somewhere. And so, for me, the interesting thing on the African continent today, even if we should start off from the conversation we picked up of, which is what France is doing now, is a starting point. But people have to know what the truth is, which is why some of us get excited when, the likes of Chiombori, for example, came out vociferous to speak. That somebody has got to tell the truth. For a very long time, the system by which things were done is very close. And a lot of the African countries today are still pretty close. The only thing we have perfected is how we change who runs the system of governance in Africa.
Right.
That's what the countries have figured out. My own country, Ghana, as an example, we have perfected it. In the last 30 years, we have decided we won't change government by the barrel of the gun. But what really inclusive policy making looks like, how open the system is for young people to participate, is usually not there. I'm not saying it's completely bad. It's a starting point. Okay, so we won't have all the pieces fall in place before we can make decisions or take action. But recognizing that this is the time to start making the action, in my opinion, is the most important thing. And all across the continent today, in every single country, these energies are aligning, people are connecting, and that is going to make things happen. So we start from somewhere. And I think the most important thing I'll say to end is that the media has got a very big responsibility in all of this. Right? So the conversation we're having, for example, is a part of it. There should be a young person listening to us today to understand that, this is probably all not the way it looks like.
Right.
There's a way for us to look better and try to understand the countries that we're coming from. And the most dangerous thing we will do will not be to educate the young people who are coming up to know the history and understand how they can then use that to inform decisions, in my opinion, particularly around policy making for the future. So we start from somewhere, educate ourselves, educate the people that we are with, educate the younger ones that are coming up, to recognize that all is not lost. Start from somewhere, we're going to make progress.
Absolutely.
Patrick Stevenson, economic analyst and contributor to the Africa Report. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Patrick, thank you so much.
We look forward to hosting you in the studio next time you're in Nairobi.
Definitely. When I'm in Nairobi, I'll come by.
Asante sana. 23 minutes to 9 o'clock. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. The conversation continues as well on our social media platforms. Spice FM KE on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can call in now, 0719-012-600. We've been talking about, the liberation of Africa from the yokes of colonialism. What Patrick has just told us is, we're seeing what's happening with the 8 countries that have been using the CFA franc. But according to him, this is just a mirage. Paris will still have some controls over what's happening to the currency and the monetary policies of those 8 countries. But is it about time that we actually are able to push for political independence, financial independence of the African continent? Let's take a look at weather and traffic, and the conversation continues. Good morning.
All right, but the sun's not being so shy in Nairobi this morning. Mostly sunny conditions today until the afternoon, where things will change. 24 degrees the high and lows of 13 today. It's 14 degrees and a little warmer at 17 in Nyeri. We'll see highs of 23 and lows of 14 with partly cloudy conditions. Nakuru is promising some rain this afternoon, currently at 16 degrees. It's partly cloudy conditions. We'll only see highs of 24. Looking in Eldoret this morning, where it's mostly sunny. That'll change later on when showers check in with highs of 23. Let's take a look at Kisumu, where it's mostly cloudy this morning. That's going to change later, though. Highs of 28 with showers later on. Kakamega is going to follow suit. Currently partly cloudy conditions. Highs of 26 and lows of 15 with showers expected in most parts of the town. All right, so let's go to the coast, where Malindi is mostly cloudy this morning at 26 degrees. There's a chance of thunderstorms later on, though, with highs of 29 and lows of 25. Mombasa is more or less the same. Light rain showers have already begun in the coastal town at 25 degrees. We'll see highs of 29 and lows of 24. And it's likely to be a shower situation throughout the day. In Kampala, it's mostly cloudy at 22. We will see showers later on with highs of 26 and lows of 19. Dar es Salaam promises to be partly cloudy for most of the day, with highs of 29. And Johannesburg, where we saw some chills, is at 7 degrees, highs of 21 and lows of 6. We'll wrap things up for now in Lagos, where it is clear skies all through. However, it'll change to thunderstorms, and in some parts they've already begun. Highs of 31 and lows of 24. I'm being told you can use the service lane on Thika Road because if you're trying to get from Muthaiga to Pangani using the main highway, is going to get you nowhere because the traffic is of epic proportions this morning on Thika Road. It's bumper to bumper from Muthaiga, and then also connecting from Kiambu Road. Nobody is experiencing a stay at home in this part. Survey to Muthaiga, the traffic starts at Safari Park, and clearly nobody is staying at home today. 6 lanes have become 8 in some parts. Ngong Road, it's fantastic because people are riding bicycles, their reflectors are on, and there's not much traffic. Thika Road is the one to watch. Mombasa Road also is the one to watch today. You're going to experience some traffic. It's going to take you a long time to get where you're going today. Other parts of the city, however, are behaving very well. Spice of MKE, let us know what you see.
The situation in this Kenya is the only conversation on morning radio that looks at matters that affect you from a local perspective, from a global perspective. We've been talking about what's happening in America, how it impacts the world, what's happening in Africa. With now the story and the conversation that we just had with Patrick Stevenson, who's an economic analyst, looking at what's happened now that the 8 countries that have been using the CFA franc will no longer have to deposit the 50% of their reserves in France, but operating locally, and what that means. And we steered that conversation actually into Africa, right? And the clamor for independence, for true independence. This mirrors with what we were discussing yesterday in the first hour, and asking ourselves, 57 years of independence, are we feeling independent?
Right.
Do we feel like we've achieved what the forefathers were fighting for, what they were clamoring for in the 40s and 50s and 60s? Are we living that dream?
It's as you say that, I remember the words that Patrick used a few minutes ago, and he talked about the fact that, we talk about all these many years, and we see these men and women who fought for this position at an older age. But in the midst of when they were fighting, they were at a very young age, 25, 27, 33, 35 years old. This is the age at which they were. So we look at people who could make a change right now in governments around the continent. We ought not to be waiting for 60 to 70. This is the time. And we're not saying that go into the bush with bows and arrows, but in this case, your machinery is your mind.
Yep.
Your machinery is the education that you have received. Your machinery is the resolve that you have to see things be better so that we can do better on the continent. And it's not so much about external outlook. It's an inward outlook.
It's an inward
look. To say
starting
how
with
we're
your
going
own
to make
dreams
things
and
better.
aspirations.
Absolutely.
If you've got your own dreams and aspirations, just work hard to attaining them. And that, if you have more and more people doing this, and especially because Africa, the majority is actually the younger population. This is not the 70s and the 60s and 70s that he was talking about. That's a minority in Africa. The majority is the younger people. And the younger people, they're feeling disenfranchised. They're feeling that, the world is not going at their pace, or things are not happening the way they ought to be happening. Then it's upon the young people to actually take up the mantle and say, I want to demand change.
I think about the young woman, for example, who is walking the streets of Dakar and is carrying a baguette. That's the kind of colonization that we see. That the colonization by the French was so deep that even their food is still being till today. However, we know for a fact that
And it's actually even baked in France and brought in.
We know for a fact that in the next 5 to 6 years, agriculture on the African continent is what is going to save many countries, and that you're going to have many African millionaires because of the fact that they have, made that deposit of their skills and expertise on the continent, as opposed to taking it out. Whereby you have, let's just look at even West Africa, whereby you have countries. A very simple thing that people may wonder: Nigeria is not able to meet its inward demand for tomatoes. The red fruit, tomato. able to
They've got to import tomato.
Yeah. So you can imagine if there are young people who understand, because it used to be seen as a thing that agriculture was for people who didn't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
We know for a fact that it is today the thing that is probably going to save this continent. So you can imagine if you have that skills and expertise being applied now, right now, and saying this is something that we can do. So I'm saying, look, I think, yes, we've been blinded so much by the fact that, or blinded so much by these pictures and saying, all right, I want to be in a suit working in a white-collar job, this, that, the other thing. But the solutions that we seek, who's to say that they need to be defined by an external force?
But that issue that he talked about, and it's something that also Patrick Athara, whenever he calls his show, he likes to remind us, the extractive system of governance is still the same one. The one that was there in the colonial years is the same one that still operates even today.
It's just a different person.
It's just a different person at the top, right? So we just moved the white man and we brought in a black man, and it's our own man who is now oppressing us. And what Patrick was trying to tell us is the lack of consciousness, although awareness, or getting to a point where that consciousness is strong enough for you to demand change. Are we able to get there? When we were talking yesterday and we were asking people to call in and ask them, so what do you feel? Do you feel like we are independent? And many of them are saying, no. If you look at the people at the top, the people at the top are still perpetuating what was happening in the pre-colonial years, in the years immediately after colonialism. This is the system that inherited the colonial system. They did not change it. They basically just used it to continue oppressing the people. But what is it that can change that conversation? We have had this conversation for so many years. It led to us changing the Constitution of Kenya in 2010. In peaceful times, the Constitution of Kenya was changed, right? And the many of the things that were being addressed were, we've got to change our system. We've got to have a new system that is by the people of Kenya, from the people, not made in Lancaster, but made in Nairobi, in Bomas. Right?
African
where
solutions to
not
African
Lancaster people went and sat, a few Africans in Lancaster and a few Wazungus in Lancaster, and came and told us this will be the way you govern yourselves going forward. But Africans sitting down and deciding, Kenyans sitting down and deciding, this is how we, the people, are giving ourselves this constitution so that we can govern ourselves this way and can make our lives better this way. And here we are. We're still feeling like the conversation hasn't changed.
So there you go, still feeling that the conversation has not changed, but however, still sitting on it and, hoping that there's going to be some kind of cosmic shift in the atmosphere, and then that is what is going to make the change come about. Absolutely not. And this is what we're talking about now. It's having the conversations, it's bringing in the mind shift, it's saying that these are the places where these conversations need to be had so that these changes can actually come about, so that these changes can come to be. Without talking about it and just sitting and hoping that, there will be an earthquake of minds and then something will happen, clearly is not the way in which we should be going.
Let's take in the telephone calls now, 0719-012-600. Annette calling in from Pangani. Good morning, Annette. Please switch off your radio.
Hello?
Hello, good morning.
Yeah, morning. So, on this topic about how we came from independence up to now.
Yeah.
You see, the colonial system was designed for a few people.
Mm-hmm.
And that is exactly what was continued post-independent Kenya. And then there was a lot of looting of the economy by certain people who incidentally were around Jomo Kenyatta or were from his community. So what developed is that we have in the system people who are privileged and they would like to maintain those privileges. And that is why when you see Uhuru Kenyatta, don't see him as a person. And 2017, which was ably decided by the Supreme Court. So, actually, it is what needs to be done is a total dismantling of the system.
How do we do this?
How does that happen?
And that is what Raila has been trying to do, to get into power and change this. You have a thorough incision of the system in this country.
So,
and it has become virtually impossible because of the factors which I have explained earlier.
So are you saying that it's impossible to then change the system as you feel that this system is not the one that's working? Because if you talk about even Raila Odinga has been in government in the last couple of decades. He has been in the Moi administration. He was there in the Kibaki administration. He's now cooperating in this administration. He's able to influence. He has influence with the system.
Let me put it to you that Raila has never been president of Kenya. And to be able to effect changes in Kenya, you must be president. You saw him being prime minister.
Yep.
How much did he do with Kibaki being the president?
So what you need is to have somebody.
Have I answered you?
Yes, I've gotten that. What you need is to have somebody at the helm to come and change the system. Do you think the talk of amending the constitution or even coming up with a new constitution in 2010 was leading us towards that? And why didn't we achieve it?
Yeah, because it will not make much impact as long as you have these people who are derived from the home guard. I mean, I've told you there are privileges and the system that is there. It will need total dismantling. And then you see... I was surprised when journalists went to State House to remember the interview of the Kiswahili radio stations.
Yep.
I think, Eric, hawa jamaa walienda kujivinjari huko.
Why? Why do you
Why did you say so?
Taking photo sessions with the president.
Why do
because
you say so?
You see, as a journalist, it's not only asking questions, but also critiquing the answers. And that's what happens in White House. Because the president told them that our health system in Kenya is so good, and even some counties' hospitals are better than neighboring countries. How could the journalists keep quiet when the president was saying that? When you remember that...
What should you have said if you were there?
Kenyans are in India that time. Marooned in India. Why have they gone to India and their hospitals in Kenya? Because there is no quality, affordable health care system in Kenya. Even the other day I was surprised, this Mwangangi, when she was asked about the wife of Burundi president, former Nkurunziza, the dictator, that the wife is in Nairobi. She was now pontificating about medical tourism in Kenya. I was shocked. The journalists are just keeping quiet. How can you talk about medical tourism and Kenyans are going to India for treatment?
True. You raised some good points. You raised some good points, and I hear you. You raised some good points. We hear you. This conversation continues, and thank you very much for calling us in.
And then lastly,
Yes, go ahead.
This cultural imperialism is taking another form in the form of Chinese imperialism. I think last week, Professor Magoa presided over a Chinese learning center and library built by the Chinese, which was handed over to the university. And I just laughed when I heard him saying that Chinese is going to be introduced in primary schools in Kenya. I mean, what the nonsense is that Chinese is going to be taught in Kenya? Chinese is not a global culture. It's not a global language.
It's not English,
it's not Spanish, it's not French.
What makes those global?
I mean, I'm just trying to say that why is this thing... That is why we have been talking about what is the government doing to promote Kiswahili, the national language. There's the Ministry of a department dealing with development of Kiswahili. Why is he talking about Chinese being taught in primary schools, and yet they have not done enough to develop Kiswahili?
All right.
Okay. Thank you very much, man. Good points you've raised this morning. 0719-012-600. The conversation continues. I mean, what we are saying is, what is it that would need to get to a point where Africans feel that what they have is what their forefathers were fighting for in terms of independence, in terms of self-governance, self-determination, and living the ideals and aspirations of the African people without any external influence? Because now every time you hear a conversation, you're already feeling that, there is sort of external influence. The African Union meeting in Addis Ababa, is it directly controlling and discussing African affairs without any kind of influence from external forces? The African Development Bank, we are now seeing the kind of push and pull that we have with the president of the African Development Bank, where one of the shareholders of the African Development Bank is not an African country, and the second largest shareholder is America, and America is saying they'd like an investigation to the president, just because the president is about to go for a second term unopposed. So there's muddying of the waters from external quarters, and this brings in the issue again of, are we truly independent? Are we self-determining?
Are we really in a state of self-rule? And I think those questions need to be understood and asked, because overriding all of this is the fact that there are individuals at the helm of a lot of these decisions that are being made. And the individual's first direction is to be selfish. And we have that being seen, and that individuals make up, families make up communities make up society makes up a nation. So then you have a nation's general direction towards being inward looking first. And the push and the pull that we see, whether we want to look at the West African Monetary Union, whether we want to look at ECOWAS, whether we want to look at the East African Community and the aid that's coming out, there are nations who are going to lend their hand who will not do it if it is not going to be of any direct interest or benefit to them. Now, when you see some of these things popping up, I think we need to begin to look at these things through a protracted lens, to say that things on the surface are not really as they are, and we need to look a little bit deeper and find out what could really be going on. And for too long, I think the wool has been pulled over our eyes. We have to be the ones to remove that wool and say, this is how we're going to choose to look at it, and this is what we're going to choose to do about it, as opposed to then being fed the solutions, being fed the assistance, and then even being fed the thinking. It can't go everything is coming from something else. We have to be the ones at some point to decide and to pull it apart and say, we want this, we don't want this. And then we talk about state sovereignty all the time. You are the one who propels your sovereignty. It starts with you. The other people who see this sovereignty will either respect it or not. But the way in which you deliver it then is very, very important. So the things that come at us, let's see how we can say, we pick it apart, we take what we want, and we discard the rest. I think we would be surprised at the milestones that we'll be able to reach by that alone.
And the optimist in you can see that happening in how long?
The realist in me can see that happening once these conversations continue to really be a thing of, let's not just talk about it and then push it on the carpet tomorrow. It has to be front center about everything, in everything that we do.
So in how long? 10 years? 5 years?
I'm not going to put a number on it. The things that winds of change don't say when they're coming. They beckon the people who are standing to go along with them. They don't really
Clouds
announce
are gathering.
when they're
There's
coming.
a tsunami that's coming. We wait for it.
And when it comes, we should be ready to go.
Okay. The conversation continues. Social media handles, Spice FM KE, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and Instagram as well. In the next hour, let's bring the conversation back home and look at the state of economy, especially in the tourism and hospitality sector in these COVID times. As we go to the top of the hour, today's proverb. Today's proverb is from, I told you it's from where? From Tunisia.
Yes.
If your friend is honey, do not lick him thoroughly. If your friend is honey, do not lick him thoroughly. It's a way of telling someone in not so many words that they should be happy with what they were given and not ask for more. Take what you're given, don't ask for more.
Right.
See your friend looking like honey, don't lick them thoroughly.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock.
Okay, so figure out there's a problem today, guys. KCA, Forest Road, Limuru Road, anywhere you want to use to try and get out of the mess that is Globe Cinema Roundabout. Don't even think about it, because it is bumper to bumper all the way from Survey, even further back, Safari Park. Everybody, their uncles and cousins are on Thika Road today. Trying to get into the CBD, it ain't happening. So you're going to have to be very patient, because everybody's on the road today. All the traffic is leading somewhere. So it's going to take you a long minute to get where you're going if your destination is the CBD. So on Thika Road. Let's take a look at Mombasa Road, which also is posing a little bit of a problem for us, at least until General Motors. After that, it's not so terrible. You'll be able to get where you're going. Other parts of the city, not so bad. It looks good in Mombasa, not clogging up the city, or not clogging up the town. It also looks good in the western part of the country, where we go from then to Nakuru, Eldoret, through. It looks good. Spice FMKE, in case you see something else, let us know. But you should be all right for now.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times.
Before we got our
New
first case of
Oko,
COVID-19 confirmed in the country, the government had already started putting in measures of how to help us cope with COVID-19. In fact, start avoiding transmission of COVID-19. Among the things that the government had said is meetings of an international nature shall no longer happen. Discouraging flights from those countries where COVID-19 has been reported. This basically has a direct impact on, one, our tourism sector, and two, our hospitality sector. This is the hotels that cater for, hold MICE meetings and events in the country. Hospitals that cater for, tourists who will come in the country, or even just local meetings and local travel. When you have a cessation of movement in the main counties of Nairobi and Kwale and Mombasa and Kilifi in the coast, basically what you're saying is that even domestically, you're discouraging travel. What have we seen happening? We've seen the immediate casualties of this were the hospitality sector. Hotels started announcing that, well, we are sending our staff home. We are reducing our operations. We are only maintaining a skeletal staff. Staff are going home. We shall maintain them on some sort of pay, either reduced pay, 80%, 70%, 60%, or even 40%. Others were saying they're just going on unpaid leave until we reopen, and how we want to cope with this. Over those weeks, we have had conversations with many players in the hotel industry. We have had even a conversation with the CS for Tourism and Wildlife, Najib Balala, who was saying, yes, we are seeing what's happening. In fact, now, as the tourism ministry, we are starting to have a conversation with the hotels and the players to see how do you cope with the current situation and how do we start preparing for the comeback after COVID. I think we're not even seeing as if it's going to last this long. And we're not even seeing an end in sight. Well, we can see the president signaling there's going to be an end in sight to all these measures. But already we are already seeing last week major hotels, flagship hotels like the Fairmont, the Norfolk, issuing a notice to all its employees and saying, you know what, guys, we are closing down. And all these jobs declared redundant. The Serena Hotel saying we are sending our staff on unpaid leave. Other hotels, other smaller establishments, of course, have had a huge hit, taken a big hit on this. And we're wondering what's happening. That has reached the president. And yesterday in his speech, the president said that to jumpstart this important sector and to protect its players from heavy financial losses, the government will refocus intervention by offering an initial 2 billion shillings exchequer support to hotels and related establishments to ensure that they maintain their staff complement. Okay, so basically what you're saying is refocus the intervention. We have seen what's happening and we've got to react immediately. But refocus the intervention means that there were other interventions that had been put in place for the entire tourism sector. I think, was it 6 billion shillings or some amount that had been announced earlier for how to revamp the tourism sector. But now we need to have some direct intervention now, offering 2 billion shillings directly from the exchequer to support hotels and such establishments and ensure that they maintain their staff complement, especially that bit. That so that you don't fire your staff. We'd like you to get this money, to access this money. And let's have this conversation this morning on what is happening to our hotel industry, what's happening to the players in this sector. And to shed some light on this is the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers and Caterers, Mike Masharia. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us again and welcome to the Situation Room.
Happy to be here once again.
Yep. Since the last time we spoke, Mike, you were going into a meeting and, you've been having these meetings, I'm sure, with the players in the industry, with the government, a lot of back and forth on how you can just keep these businesses afloat, okay? And now we are seeing some of these businesses coming out to announce that really they are struggling. Just paint us a picture of what's happening in the hotel sector.
I think the last time we spoke, we were going into a meeting with the central bank governor, but we'll talk about that in a short while.
Yep.
Now, what's happening in the sector is that we are technically shut down because you remember even before the crisis broke out in Kenya, even before we reported the first case in Kenya, we already had cases of COVID-19 in our source markets.
Yeah.
So we had cases in Asia. It was already in Italy, heading out to UK, Germany, France, and so these are at some of our key source markets.
Yeah.
So obviously the key source markets were cancelling. So around the 2nd or 3rd or 4th of February, we started receiving cancellations. So, and then obviously now it became very, very bad. Immediately we reported a case here. We stopped flights into Nairobi. We shut down restaurants. The government took measures to slow the spread of this disease.
Yep.
And that is really appreciated. So what we were seeing modeling along other countries, we were seeing a situation whereby would probably be at a peak probably after a month or two.
Yep.
And then the curve would start flattening afterwards.
Yep.
So we had given ourselves about 3 to 4 months whereby would be able to tough it out and then probably start picking up after. But as you can see, there is no expert in this virus. It's behaving different in different places.
Yeah.
Behaving differently in Brazil, differently in Chile, differently in Algeria, and obviously differently in this part of the world, the equatorial region. Now we have been told that our peak is around August, September. So that tells us that if you take it from March or February, you look at a 7-8 month period whereby you would have to continue with lockdown measures. And 7 to 8 months is already 3/4 of a year without proper economic activity. Then it puts us in a situation whereby we'd have now to be dealing with other issues like hunger, incidences of crime increasing, maybe social problems. We've seen some people getting redundancy notices and committing suicide. So, other issues are popping up. And then again, we've been told again by the World Health Organization that it's going to be here for a while. So we must learn to live with it. So what we need to do now is move from these containment measures and start looking at mitigating measures whereby we accept that the virus is here for a while, that we have to live with it, but we have to protect ourselves from it, using both a hybrid probably of containment and mitigation. So that's where we are. Hotels, as we speak right now, and this is not an issue of hotels anymore. We have subsectors in tourism. We have hotels. We have restaurants. We have pubs. We have travel agents.
Yeah.
We have airlines. We have event managers. We have national parks. We have all these other players that deal in tourism.
Yes.
And when we do a physical count of the jobs that we are holding, it's about 3.1 to 3.5 million jobs that are directly held by all these other subsectors. I'll give you an example. The travel agencies alone hold about 460,000 jobs.
Wow.
As long as there is no flights taking off and landing, those guys are technically unemployed.
Yep, they have no job.
Yeah, they have no job. Our guys in the hotels, 750,000 of them. As long as there's no clients coming in and out, they have no job.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tour operators, for example, the ones who take us to the national parks and everything, they at the moment they have grounded about 3,000 vehicles. So that's 3,000 drivers out of work.
Yep.
Probably contracts with the fuel stations that fuel those cars. So you can see the ripple effect is quite huge.
It's huge.
Yeah, so we need to start thinking. If you look at the people who work in pubs, for example, most of them are employed on a daily basis. So if there's no money coming in, they are not earning. Restaurants, and we saw that the government was kind enough to come out with protocols for reopening of restaurants. And you can see a bit of people are now getting back into jobs. But they're very, very... their mental state is not very good because they are not sure whether the job will be there tomorrow.
Yeah, there's no surety. I mean, you're just waking up to go to work today and you don't know whether you'll be ordered back into a shutdown.
And then, Eric, you go, you find a good portion of your friends have been laid off.
Yep.
So you're all alone.
Yep.
It puts you in a very uncertain state of mind where you don't know whether you're next or not. So we are in a very, very difficult situation, and we need now to start thinking about how to navigate out of it.
I think also, Mike, as we look at this, is that we don't have an appreciation for how far-reaching the negative effects of this are. I mean, just as the moment you mentioned drivers, and when we're looking at, just that road transport alone. And then now, by the time you want to talk about drivers, then you want to talk about a local taxi service. You want to talk about then sitting in a restaurant and all the wait staff, all the kitchen staff. Then you want to go to a hotel and look at the ground staff. I mean, just to think about it is mind-boggling. In terms of what this has really done in terms of impacting just this sector of the economy. And
it's equivalent to shutting down the entire civil service. 3.5
I mean, there you go,
million
3.5 million jobs. I mean, really, that's what we're looking at. Okay.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
If you step out of let's step out of the industry for a while. Let's just step out for a minute and think of 7,000 hotels. Let's take Nairobi, for example. 10,000 pubs and restaurants. Kisumu, 8,000. Mombasa, 7,000. Kilifi, 3,000.
Yeah.
Now, think of the people who supply into those, because what we think ourselves of, because we only have beds, furniture, and space.
Yeah.
Everything else is outsourced.
It's outsourced.
So
the food is outsourced.
Yes, the food. You've got the lady who supplies you with cabbages.
Yeah.
You've got the guy who supplies you with meat. You've got farmers supplying you with breakfast items. You've got Kenya Power, because we use a lot of power in our ovens.
Yeah.
You've got in places like Masai Mara where we are not on the national grid yet. People use generators.
Yeah.
So you use industrial diesel, and it's being sold to you by somebody else.
Yeah.
You've got soap, tissue paper, shampoo, cleaning agents, water, all this.
There's a flower vendor who brings the flowers to the hotel.
Exactly. So you've got this huge retail outlet that has shut down. And the effects now will start being seen even in other sectors, in manufacturing, in petroleum, in energy, even in government, because they're no longer collecting the taxes that they used to collect. So it's the ripple effect is actually quite humongous. Even if we just step out of the industry for a minute and look at how it affects other industries, you can understand your typical. We call them. We try to source all our inputs locally. We try as much as we can to source everything locally, and we try and build the local person. In fact, the local farmer, for example. So if say you have hotels, we have a code of ethics. If you operate in Murang'a, for example, our code stipulates that you support the local community by first employing the guys who are there, and then getting supplies from the people who are there, so that you can boost the local economy, even as you try and move out to other areas. So you can see the impact on the local economies of where we operate is very, very high.
Very high. As Eric said earlier, Mike, is that, the presidency has taken notice of this. I mean, even before the announcement that we saw yesterday, there was something that would be done or would be offered in terms of help to kind of help out what's going on here. Now, now that we've laid the ground and we looked a little bit at the magnitude of what's really happening here, now that vis-a-vis what is being put out, I'm not sure we're looking at maybe collectively about 10 billion shillings from what was announced previously, and then what was announced yesterday. How then would this apply practically? What is it going to do? What is it going to help? Is it going to save people's jobs? Is it going to give them something to hold on to until things normalize? What exactly would happen?
From our point of view, you've got to look at the government's stimulus as a full package. And let's start with the reduction of VAT. Because what was supposed to happen was that you're supposed to reduce the cost of consumption. And that was one major win. Then the government reduced PAYE. So generally putting more money in the pocket of staff. Yes. Then we went to the central bank, and the central bank reduced the cash ratio.
For the bank.
To the banks, which meant there was a bit more liquidity for us guys. That freed up about 35 billion. And that 35 billion was actually utilized fully by the hospitality industry. To reschedule their loans and everything. Then they reduced what is known as the central bank rate, the CBR. That meant that the loans now became cheaper, so your interest rates went down. So all these things coming into play, then CS Balala announced a 500 million recovery fund for marketing post-COVID. Yes. Then the president came with more announcements. I think the first one was about 3 billion. It was 3 to the hospitality sector, and 3 billion to the micro and small enterprises. So it was envisaged that some people, the ones who are employed on a daily basis, would fall under MSMEs, and then the rest of us would be under
the other 3 for hospitality.
Then they told us use it for renovations. So we went back to the government and said, what we need right now
is not renovation.
Is not to renovate. What we need is support for
operations,
salaries, operations, and also to comply with the new protocols. You see, like now you have to buy temperature guns. You have to test staff. You have to put plexiglass in your receptions. You really have to redesign certain areas. You have to clean duvets every time somebody checks out. So we say the kind of money that we need now is actually to support operations. And this is what the president announced yesterday, which is very welcome. Now, the question is it enough?
Actually, before you go even further into whether it's enough, when the president announced the 2 billion yesterday, is it part of the 53.7 stimulus that he had announced earlier, or is this a fresh 2 billion?
it wasn't clear from his speech, so we'll have to look at the budget estimates that will come out.
Okay.
But we're actually hoping that it's extra to what was previously announced. Yeah, so we can be able, even if it's to support salaries for 1 more month, because what we did as a sector, in March we said we'll pay our people full salaries.
Yep.
Then in April we said we'll send them on leave at full salaries. Then we were saying that at that point we would rotate people on a 2-week basis so that they work on unpaid leave for 2 weeks. So they're able to earn about 50% and stay home, so that they are able to look after themselves, according to the protocols that were given by government. But we shut down. So we told them, stay home anyway, we'll still pay you the 50%.
The 50% of the salary.
Yes, in May and June. Now, up to that point, we exhausted all our reserves because the salaries, if you look at the salaries in our business, because we are very labor intensive, we usually do payroll and related costs are usually about 35 to 40% of your revenues. Yeah, so if you have no revenues coming in, then you're talking about almost everything that you have going to salaries.
Going straight to
Exactly.
Yeah, so
is this enough? So, now let's go to that question.
If you look at the revenues that we earn as tourism, like now this year we were expecting to go to probably 250 billion in terms of revenue. Take 40% of that as payroll, and you're easily landing to about 70 B. If you wanted to support salaries, that's the amount of money that we'd be talking about. Yeah, so given that we understand that the government...
70B minus 2B.
Minus 2B. But when you think about it, it's what we do with what we have. So if we can take that and utilize it properly, and go back to government and say, this is how we've utilized this package that you've given us, can we start thinking of, and we don't want to continue relying on government. We don't want to be in a situation where we are sitting 7-8 months and asking government to give us money.
Okay, so I've got to stop you there and ask you a question, Mike, because the desire is not to depend on government, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What would the sector be able to do so then that there would not be that reliance on government? Practically, what can be done?
We need to open up. And I know this is a controversial subject when the numbers are going up. But you must remember, we are the only sector that has come up with proper protocols. We have, in our industry, we have a 7-page summary of what needs to be done where in terms of mitigation. We are going now to look at making the airport a safe zone. Where we require people to be tested before coming in. We check their temperatures when they arrive. You put them in a car that has been disinfected and follows various protocols with a tested driver. Put them in a hotel that is tested. Take them to a national park that is safe. So we are creating this, what is known as a safe circuit. And if you are monitoring the Kenya Gazette last week, you saw that the Ministry of Tourism gazetted a task force to come up with industry protocols. Now, as we speak, we have already started testing, mass testing of our staff through the Nairobi Metropolitan Service. We started last week at Mambo and Carnival and Park in Radisson and Windsor. We are testing 200 a day. So every staff who is coming to work will be tested. If they test positive, then we follow the protocols to get them help and get them treated.
And when you talk about this, you're talking about the entire spectrum in the sector. This is the hotels, restaurants.
The hotels, restaurants, and pubs.
And pubs.
Tour operators, airlines, everything.
Okay.
So we are creating a safe zone, and we are hoping that the other subsectors might be able to pick up and follow us, so that your tested staff who are in a safe zone are not entering a matatu that is not safe.
Yeah.
Or they are not entering a shopping mall that is not safe.
And that's where now the rubber meets the road, Mike. Because when you talk about doing all these things, but you expect your staff to still use public transport to come, you still expect that people are going to socialize once they have come to work. They're still going to socialize in some way or the other. Then we are talking about exposure.
We are talking about exposure. This is why we've got to try and follow these protocols in all the sectors. If we are able to do that, social distance, hand wash, sanitizers, face masks, if we are able to do all these things and make people conscious. You know, we did, I'm a guy who grew up in the 70s, and there was an outbreak of cholera. And I remember the communication about what not to do with cholera is actually what mitigated. In the 80s and 90s, we had HIV and AIDS, and the communication. Now, in this era, we are not seeing a lot of serious persuasive communication. In fact, we started out very badly.
So the messaging is all wrong.
The messaging needs to be correct. We need to tell people this is the benefit, this is what you should do, this is what you should not do. We know we are social animals. We need to change that for the time being. We need to, we need to put in all these protocols. But if you say you're COVID positive, it's your fault, you're a criminal, we'll dump you in some quarantine facility. And you'll stay there until we decide whether you leave or you stay. It's a wrong message. The right thing to be done, but the communication is wrong. So you find that people are being stigmatized.
Mike,
so if we move now,
we've seen from some establishments, already reaching out, even before this, let's call it stimulus that was announced by the president. We've seen that there's some institutions, some establishments who are already, reaching out to people. Yes, we are social beings, so they understand this and saying, before we can open up, even already asking people, come to the hotel, for example. If you can find your way here, you just pay for your food. And you can stay here for free, use the facilities. So, I mean, it would seem like an act of desperation in terms of we're trying to keep afloat as establishments. But then you have so many other things that are stopping, okay? You're in Nairobi. Even if you wanted to take advantage of this offer that's put in, how do you get there? You can't leave Nairobi. How do you make sure that some of these protocols are put in place? And it looks like something that would be a fantastic idea. And it looks like something that could be a promotion, for example, of local tourism. It looks like a great idea, but then there seem to be so many other things that are stopping this from being able to happen. So are there conversations that can be had? We look at the church or the faith-based organizations already having conversations with government, and it looks like those things would happen. So I guess describing that, the question would be, are there conversations that can be had so that you don't have to get to the point whereby you're waiting until things are opened up, but that there are things that can be done in the meantime to keep some of these institutions afloat?
Yes, there's the messaging should actually revolve around health and safety. You remember, crisis in tourism is not a new thing. We've had crisis dating way back to 1991 when the Gulf War broke out. We had problems in 98 after the twin bombing of Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. We had more problems in just before that in 97 when there was the Kayabombo clashes at the coast. We had issues in Enosupukia in around 2002 before the election. We had a problem when the former minister, Interior Minister Chris Murungaru got together with the U.S. Ambassador Johnny Carson and announced that terrorists are in Kenya. And all flights into Kenya were banned in 2003. We had a major problem in 2008 after the post-election violence. We've had smaller issues, highland malaria here, Ebola breaks out in DR Congo, it affects us. It's not a new thing. And we've had, under the Ministry of Tourism, we've always had a standing committee to mitigate tourism crisis. In fact, right now it's being led by the former Inspector General,
right?
The current CAS tourism, Boynet.
Yeah.
And he's doing a good job. And that is why you found that when the crisis broke out, we were very fast. In fact, in a week, we had already sat down with the unions.
Yeah.
We had decided what to do. We had agreed how to go. By the time even the main union, COTU, came into play with FKE, it was about 3 weeks after we had signed our memorandum. Because we are already used to this crisis situation. We go and put out every scenario out there and decide how we're going to do it. So right now, the communication should be around health. The same way we got together with the security forces and mitigated. You remember Westgate 2014?
Yeah.
It almost shut us down.
Yes.
That was the first time we saw people being evacuated from Kenya, from the Kenyan coast. And we sit down and work out all these scenarios with the Ministry of Interior, and we mitigate a lot of. In fact, we've stopped so many because of training. We have constant training. We've stopped a lot of terror attacks. Now, coming to health, when we shut down and people were coming back to Kenya, we were asked to give our facilities as quarantine facilities.
Yeah.
We did not even have standard protocols. We hosted those. In fact, even some people were even leaving quarantine yesterday, the ones who came 2 weeks ago. And for all these hotels that have hosted quarantine passengers, even where there is a reported positive case, there has not been a single cross-contamination to the staff. Because we are very well drilled. And that was even before we had our own protocols from the Ministry of Health. Now that we have protocols and we've agreed with the Ministry of Health, in fact, we've had about 4 meetings with the Ministry of Health, countless meetings with the CS Balala, countless meetings with the PS and the CAS in tourism, 3 meetings with the Honorable Chelugui, the CS of Labor, and 2 meetings with the Treasury CS Attorney. So we've got all these conversations going behind the scenes, and even those people who are advertising for their places to open up, what is the main concern of your customer at the moment is not a good time.
Yeah.
It is health and safety.
Yeah.
So your initial message should be, we have done A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
We've secured this.
True.
We've disinfected this. We've tested these people. You're safe here. So that now I know that I'm safe, I can go there.
Then I can make the decision to come.
You can make the decision to come.
Mike, let's take a short break, take a look at traffic, and then we'll continue this conversation. When we come back out of this conversation, out of this break, I'll lead you into the question of, you are talking about what the industry is doing, and I can hear the focus is a lot on the hotels, the formal establishments called hotels, but we will go into pubs and restaurants.
Yes.
Because that is where the concern of the public would be, in terms of the behavior of people and how people would be behaving in those social places or social joints where they go to have nyama choma and 102.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that when we come out of this break. We are speaking with Mike Macharia. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers and Caterers, looking at how hard hit the hotel industry has been, the tourism sector has been. 3.5 million people easily affected by this. Out of jobs, many of them out of jobs, many of them with reduced incomes. Let's take a look at traffic at 26 to 10.
So the accident on Mombasa Road, right to the Gateway Mall, has left quite a lot of debris on the road. So you need to be very careful when approaching, and it could fly in different directions. Still getting someone still hopeful that it will be cleared up. But now that is one of the consequences of that has taken place there. It's still slow on Jogo Road, at Rikana into town. Everybody's getting used to the new normal and is now back on the streets. Thika Road is still a problem from KCA to Allsop, Survey, Safari Park. And then trying to get connecting to Kiambu Road and Muthaiga Corner, and then to the Pangani Underpass. Traffic, and trying to get into the CBD. It's going to take you a while this morning, unfortunately. Let's see what it looks like in a short while. But for now, approaching those areas, it's going to have to require some of your patience, right? There's been an accident at the Nairobi National Park, and that's on the southern bypass. And so a car has unfortunately overturned. This is what we are seeing this morning. Please be careful, folks. I beg of thee. Spice FMKE, that's how you can reach us on Twitter.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Our live stream is www.spicefm.co.ke, Spice FM KE, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And we're broadcasting in Nairobi, 94.4, 87.9 in Mombasa, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, Eldoret, 96.7, Nyeri, 90.9, Malindi, 97.7. In the Situation Room this morning is Nduoko and Eric Latif. And joining us on the line is Mike Masharia. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers and Caterers. We are talking about, what the hotel industry and the tourism hospitality industry needs to do to revive itself. 3.5 million people have been affected by this, the closure and shutdown of this sector, because that's what it is. It's basically a closure. 750,000 people working for the hotels. We are talking about even tour agents, travel agents, 460,000 people working in travel agents. We're talking about tour operators, restaurants, pubs, very many of them across the country. And there's been that conversation about reopening. Now, we started by seeing the reopening of restaurants. And some of those things are restaurant/pub, which sell alcoholic beverage as well. And there has been some kind of reaction to this. Well, yes, these ones are opening. But even what we've had the CS Mutahi Kagwe saying is that he's noticing the behavior of Kenyans. People are going to the restaurants and all they want is to have a drink. And you're using all other excuses basically to go back to a pub. So Mike, when you tell us about all the protocols that as an industry you've come up with, I can see how the 5-star hotels, the big brand restaurants would be able to adhere and live with these protocols. But I do not see how the smaller ones would be able to follow the same protocols. We're talking about the small pubs, small restaurants, small hotels. And because we can't also say that you guys are open and the local Mama Pima is not opening.
It's Eric. It's the issue of alcohol has been debated for very long. I remember we came up with the Alcoholic Drinks Control Act.
Yep.
Sometime, I think about 10 years ago, the Mutudo Law.
Yeah.
And there's always two problems. The first problem is the supply of alcohol at the lower end. You remember EABL had come up with a beer known as Senator, I think.
Yes, yeah.
That the government had decided not to tax. And it was supplying the lower end.
Yeah, to address safe consumption of alcohol.
Yes, exactly. So at that time, we actually saw a lot of people move from your local Mama Pima to Senator because it was affordable. The second thing is the timing of when do you drink, when don't you drink. Traditionally, even culturally, Africans, even when they had a drink at an event, it was never during the day. It was just before when the sun goes down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe for about an hour, then you go home.
Yeah.
Now, I remember in the old days, your typical pub manager, no matter where it is, even if it was in a local pub in Homa Bay, was a very powerful person. They could tell you, you've had enough,
Go home.
Yeah. Now we've gotten into a situation where probably money is power.
Yeah.
So anybody who has a bit of money can decide to get into an argument with the manager.
Yeah.
If you look at the licensing of pubs, you have a license of up to 11 p.m. and we start at 5 to 11. Then there are others who are restaurants, and then they are allowed to sell a drink with a meal.
Yeah.
The analogy of C.S. Kagwe of sausage and 2 beers, it just brought it home.
Yeah.
Because then people try to bend the rules, and that's what he was trying to say.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen all the time. Now, because of this curfew situation and opening pubs, what we saw, like in the UK when they were limited to timings, there was what is known as binge drinking.
Yeah.
So people were trying to drink so much within a very short time.
Yeah.
What we need to do, because we have an association that deals with pubs and restaurants, PERAC. And PERAC has very, very strict codes of ethics. And they have said, if somebody is behaving this way, get them out of that pub.
That pub, yeah.
But now, but the problem is,
Enforcement.
will they just pop up to the next pub, or will they accept to go home?
Yeah.
So this is the kind of messaging that we need to talk to people, and talk about having a drink responsibly, which is what the problem is.
Especially now at this time, where even that responsibility is not just on how much you're consuming, it's also how you're socializing in that social place.
Yes, and it affects others. So it's something that we need to have a real conversation around it and see how we can mitigate that. Maybe we need to empower the managers a bit more, the bouncers. When your volumes go up, then, politely you're told it's a good time to leave. On the flip side of it, there are businesses. They need to continue with their business, and they have customers. But you cannot have customers that, if we say that, for example, everybody is an alcoholic, for example. You cannot have customers who are all alcoholics.
Yeah.
It defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
So we need to find. I mean, and if you look at drinking, people have a glass of wine with lunch. Some people have a bottle of champagne when they are getting married or celebrating a birthday. There's a whole spectrum of responsible consumption.
Drinkers.
Yes, that we need now to bring everybody else, and this is why I'm talking about the communication. It's health and safety. Now, what is affecting health and safety? Irresponsible drinking will affect health and safety.
True.
It will even affect driving.
Knowing
It affects
Kenyans,
all
Mike, because you live in this country, and you've also seen you've seen the example of what happened in South Africa. South Africa, they decided no sale of alcohol of whatever nature, right? And the government that time was justifying, we cannot say that we can allow sale of alcohol in big hotels and discriminate against the smaller members of the community. And we cannot say that we will allow the sale of alcohol through online platforms, because not everybody has access to the e-commerce platforms. So blanket, no sale. In Kenya, there is still sale of alcohol, although pubs are closed. And I want to ask you directly, should we have a graduated reopening of the hospitality sector? We have started with restaurants. Maybe we go into the big hotels from 3-star to 4-star to 5-star. And then eventually we get to opening of bars that are basically licensed as bars.
We support gradual opening of the economy. We support that because it will give us also an indication of where the virus is going without really having a major spike.
Okay.
We do need. And that's why for us, even under PERAC, they've come up with very strict protocols and they've been published by the Ministry of Health, by the way. And these protocols, if they are followed to the letter, we will have no problem. Now, and it's not a Kenyan problem alone. In the month of March alone, police in the Greater Manchester area in the UK stopped 1,139 house parties under lockdown measures.
Yeah.
And that was in Manchester alone. You know, in Nairobi, there were some people who were hiding in their houses and having parties during lockdown. Now, we have also seen a trend where the consumption has now moved to the home. And we are seeing cases of domestic violence increasing. Because the mzee is there having 2 bottles of whiskey on his own and decides this is too much stress and takes it out on the family. So it's a wider social issue that needs to be addressed. But the ones that are doing proper business and they are following protocols and they can be inspected. You know, at a typical pub that has a license to shut down at 11 p.m. should take their last order at 10 and close down. But what do we see? We see them continuing till the midnight. The club that should be taking over from 11 to maybe 2 a.m. in the morning is denied the opportunity to be a club because the pubs are operating illegally. So so these are some of the things that we need to have a real conversation around and ask ourselves, are we really regulating properly the various sectors of our economy? And that's what we need to do. And a graduated opening of the economy, we support it. In fact, we have a plan, which I'll be sharing with you in a few minutes, of that reopening.
Right. So from what you're saying, this can happen. Now, if we want to look around, if you want to use other examples of the world and say that, you know, there was an opening and then there was a retraction of the same. So if there's an opening and then we see a spike, for example, and then we go back to closing, has that been taken into consideration? What then needs to be done? Because the question is going to be asked.
A reclosure is always on the table. It's on the table because any responsible government is not going to sit back and watch a spike in this virus. We are the same people, citizens, who will go back and tell you, government of Uhuru Kenyatta, you have failed. So we are very unforgiving. so if there is, in fact, we should not even wait for a spike. We should be having inspections, regular inspections, that tell you if you're not following this protocol, we are shutting you down. You see, we have a Public Health Act, and the Public Health Act operates even outside COVID. So, for example, if you have an open sewer in an establishment and you're calling yourself a hotel, the public health authorities will shut you down. They will not wait for people to get cholera. So the Public Health Act should still be in operation, and they should be able to inspect, and they should close down people who are not following the protocols, because this is the only way you can stop, because by the time you spike, it's too late.
Doubts will emerge, Mike, on enforcement. We are very good at coming up with protocols. We have protocol for everything. Protocol for how you get out of your house to work, protocol for how you enter work and leave the office at the end of the day. But enforcement of the same. If we look at how many of these protocols for fighting COVID have been implemented or even enforced, starting from the management of the quarantine centers. Now we are even talking about management of the isolation centers. We are seeing people complaining in Mombasa about isolation. Do we have the confidence that with all these new protocols that will come in place with reopening the economy, every sector will have its own protocols? Are we going to be able to enforce them?
That's why you need now some sort of self-enforcement. And this can be done by use of associations such as ours. In certain areas, you can use the resident associations. When Nyumba Kumi started, everybody sneered at it. But it is something that can actually be used, where you're your brother's keeper. So you're all looking out for each other. There's a lot of residents association, citizens watch. Let's empower those guys. And we are not telling them to arrest people and whip them. We're just telling them to go out with communication. Hey, you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
If somebody sees, if you see something, and this is a bigger problem. We walk around. Eric, you see a matatu has blocked an entire line of traffic.
Yep.
But it's none of your business.
Yep.
You're walking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not my forest, not my monkeys.
Yeah. Yes, the border guy. It's none of my business. Yeah. The guys who are queuing behind, nobody is concerned enough to get out of their car and tell the matatu, hey, you're blocking the road.
True.
This is not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
We have to wait for a policeman to walk 2 kilometers to come and tell the matatu move.
Yeah.
So it is time we stopped this passive attitude and started calling out on this bad behavior.
Personal responsibility.
Where we see it, and we take responsibility ourselves, and we tell people, this is the communication. And I go back to the advent of HIV and AIDS. The communication was so structured. In churches, abstain. In what were these guys on TV? Protection.
Yeah.
Hybrid communication that really brought down the numbers within a very short time. And if we are able to sensitize everybody, start at home, start with the children, wash hands, do this, don't touch things unnecessarily. When you go out, come back, this is what you do. If we start there and communicate, you will see a lot of mitigation, because it is, by the way, it is the people. And we are 47 million. Now, even if you have a policeman per person, you'll need another 47 million policemen.
We'll overpopulate the country.
Yeah. So you'll need that to enforce. So what you need is, of course, you need the government side of it.
Yeah.
To address the criminal and civil wrong elements. But this thing, in fact, even churches at this point, the ones that are beaming online, should be. I watch TV here, and your news station KTN. All your anchors, before they sign off, they have a message. Yeah, they tell us, remember, wash your hands, keep distance, stay safe. And that is a KTN thing. Nobody has said, nobody has come and given KTN the script. Yeah, KTN has decided, as a responsible business, we are going to talk about this. Now, the churches, as responsible churches, they should be talking about it, even when they are beaming live. Us guys, as responsible businesses, we should talk about it.
True.
As responsible citizens, we should talk about it and sensitize. Like now, there's a time I went into a lift, and there was 4 of us in a lift. It was quite spacious.
Yeah.
Another 2 guys came in without masks.
Yeah.
And I asked them, what are you guys doing? Yeah, you either stay out, or all of us leave the lift and leave you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they felt a bit ashamed. They stepped out.
Yeah.
So now, if I had kept quiet, they are cross-contaminating each other, and they are putting us at risk.
And you'd have posted it on social media saying, how irresponsible Kenyans are.
No, it's the best. What I believe, Eric, is that what the issue of killing the snake. Yeah. So if you see something wrong, address it there, finish it.
Hit it on the head.
Don't keep quiet. Take pictures and then send out on social media, and people are asking you, what were you doing? Why were you letting this happen?
Yeah, exactly.
Last question as we wrap this up, Mike, is that, we've been talking about this, and I think people's minds first go to the big establishments, and then we've gone down to, the very basic unit when it comes to this sector. So as we are looking at opening up, consideration that this opening up does, and the considerations are going across board, from top to bottom, from bottom to top.
Yes. Now, what's happening is, first of all, our business cannot operate under curfew
conditions,
situations, under curfew conditions, because what a curfew does in the eyes of the world, it tells you you're in an emergency situation. And that emergency could be security related, could be health related, it could be anything.
Yeah.
So if I'm seated in one of the key source markets, let's say Germany, for example, which is going to open up for external travel in a week and a half. The person sitting in Germany wanting to come to Diani will not book it if there is curfew, because they cannot access travel insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is what a curfew situation triggers an automatic travel advisory from the source market. So you cannot go there. Now, even you as a person, as a traveler, right now there is a curfew in Minnesota.
Yeah.
If you're going to visit, you know very well that
it's high risk.
The problems are not everywhere in Minnesota. It's just maybe some parts.
Yes.
But you're not going to go there because of the curfew.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if there was no curfew, you'd probably consider, and somebody will tell you, I remember when there was problems in Tiananmen Square in Egypt. We were going to Egypt and they were telling us.
Tahrir Square.
Yeah. Tiananmen was China.
In China,
years ago. Tahrir, yeah. And they were telling us, don't worry, you can leave the airport and go to this side of Cairo where there is no problems. But they never imposed a curfew, because if they did, then they knew they would lose customers.
Yeah.
So for our business to operate, the curfew needs to be lifted. Because it doesn't matter whether curfew is 7 to 7 or 9 to 4 or 2 a.m. to 4 a.m.
Yeah.
It is curfew. Now, the second thing is that this, the president came up with a vocabulary, cessation of movement. For Nairobi and Mombasa needs to be reviewed, because if you're looking to jumpstart domestic tourism, you must open up Nairobi, because a lot of spending actually happens in between Nairobi and the other counties.
Yeah.
Yeah, even a simple thing like somebody sick in Kakamega and they need a proper referral to a place like Kenyatta, they will need to get to Nairobi.
True.
Yeah, and they're not getting. Now, what we need to do is probably make sure that the people who are leaving have either been tested or there's a way to determine that they are leaving and they're not putting other people at risk where they are going. Yeah, so that we need to do. But we must, for us to jumpstart domestic,
we must reopen.
We must reopen. For us to jumpstart regional, you remember we have a very good deal between Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda.
Yeah.
Where you can move within the region using your ID.
Yeah. And
just that initiative alone, we saw a lot of weddings being held in our coastline, in Mombasa, Watamu, and Diani, simply because of that. We saw a lot of movement between the borders. We know that we will not have huge numbers to begin with, but just like the 2 billion,
it'll be something.
We will make do with what we have, and we will try to save as many. Because as long as you have money coming in and out, you see, like now, even if I went to the bank and said I needed a loan, and the bank is looking at my figures and saying there is no income, how are you going to repay?
True.
But if I have a little income, the bank might say, okay, let's stretch your loan. Instead of giving you a 3-year loan, we might give you a 6-year period.
True. Yeah. But
because we can see your income. Yeah, your income is little, and you can be able to pay little by little.
Yeah.
But right now, we cannot even have a conversation with the bank because most people think that banks have money. The money they have is not theirs. It belongs to depositors.
It's the money that you deposit as a business as well.
Who expect a return on that deposit.
True. Mike Masharia, thank you very much for speaking to us. We've come to the end of the show. I mean, it's an interesting conversation.
The time goes too quickly.
We could talk for 2 days. Asante sana for speaking to us. Mike Masharia is the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers and Caterers. Have a good day, Mike.
Yeah, thanks.
And all the best as you push for the reopening of the economy, especially for your members.
Thank you so much.
Coming to the end of the show, Ndu, it's been a jam-packed one.
It has.
We've had a conversation from America to Ghana to Nairobi. What did you like to say?
It's clear that a lot of these conversations that we've had today just need to keep happening. It's the conversations that's going to spur a mind shift. And we also realize that solutions lie for a lot of these issues in a mind shift. And so let's keep talking, guys. We keep quiet, we do ourselves a disservice.
How do you say honey in pidgin?
Honey. Honey.
Honey.
Yeah.
Okay. If your friend is honey, do not lick him thoroughly. That's today's proverb. It's from Tunisia. It's a way of telling someone in not so many words that they should be happy with what they are given and not ask for more. If your friend is honey, do not lick him thoroughly. Thank you very much for tuning in today to The Situation Room. Join us again tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. More conversations. And also tomorrow we'll have more of your involvement. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock.